It all begins in the western lands of the continent of Midoro, where 4 years have passed since Emperor Cardamom took the throne of the Shrezzer Empire and began to conquer all the neighboring kingdoms. Amidst all that terrible whirlwind of wars, there was a mercenary who preferred to hide his past from everyone. He seemed to bear extremely deep secrets. Suddenly, the story jumps back in time to when young Erlich is caught off guard by the sudden announcement that he must marry immediately. Not understanding a thing, he questions his father about it, who simply explains that his fiancée will be the daughter of the Manhwa. The father continues to give details, saying that the young woman is only 16 years old, extremely beautiful, and has only one hobby: taking care of the garden. Just then, the door to the grand meeting hall begins to open slowly in front of them. Ulrich's father thinks they make a good match, and that's how, at just 14 years old, the boy sees his fate change dramatically. He found himself engaged to a noble young lady without even knowing what she looked like, leaving him completely incredulous about the whole situation. Ulrich just couldn't wrap his head around the idea that he was actually about to get married overnight. Already dressed for the big ceremony, he tries to figure out what's going on as he looks at the enormous angel statue in the chapel. At that moment, he wonders why such an important noble woman from such a distinguished lineage would accept this union. After all, it didn't make sense that someone from high society would marry the heir of a simple merchant family like his. Her thoughts are interrupted when the bride finally appears in the hall and greets them with impressive elegance. Ulrich is completely frozen and blushing as he looks at the young woman's face, barely managing to whisper the name Tyria. She formally introduces herself as Tyria Weavin, gracefully walking towards him in her stunning wedding dress. The girl's beauty is overwhelming, with bright golden hair that reminds one of wheat fields and sparkling green eyes like spring shoots. Her skin is extremely fair and delicate, contrasting perfectly with her cherry red lips. If Ulrich had to describe her in just one sentence, he would say that she is a mysterious and incredibly refined young woman. Suddenly, someone taps Ulrich on the shoulder to remind him that he needs to introduce himself, snapping him out of his admiring trance, a bit clumsily. He bows to her and says that he hopes they can have a good life together from this point on. Though the guy's mind is a total mess from how fast everything's happening, one clear thought manages to stand out from the chaos. He realizes that from that solemn moment at the altar, he will spend the rest of his days by the side of that special person, looking back. Ulrich realizes that the overwhelming feeling he had when he saw her was his first love. When it comes to exchanging the rings, he feels so shy with the goofy smile trying to escape his face that he has to make an effort to hide it. He puts on a more serious expression just to hold back the immense joy he feels inside during the vow. However, focused only on his own happiness, he was completely oblivious to a crucial detail about the bride. Ulrich didn't even suspect that the whole situation could be hurting Tyria's feelings deeply. Time passes and the scene shifts to a heavy, stormy night outside the grand family mansion. In one of the rooms, a single candle burns slowly in the night silence. Ulrich fidgets with his wedding ring, still trying to wrap his head around how everything happened so fast. He smiles shyly, leaning back on the bed, thinking that this elegant young woman is now really his wife. But the memory of his father announcing that the bride would be the daughter of Lord Weavin echoes loudly in his mind, and as the memories of that conversation return, the smile on the young man's face begins to fade. After all, no matter how hard he tries to analyze the situation from every possible angle, none of it seems to make any real sense. Restless in bed, Ulrich decides to ask the housekeeper straight up why a noble would agree to marry the heir of a family of merchants. The housekeeper, Rhonda, averts her gaze and hesitates a lot, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Noticing her reaction, Ulrich presses on and begs her to finally spill the whole truth. Honda stays silent for a few moments, seemingly wrestling internally with the burden of that secret. Finally, he reveals to the young master that it's all just a convenient arranged marriage. The housekeeper explains that although the Weavin family had much fame and wealth in the past, they are now drowning in debt and have no funds to survive. Because of this, Ulrich's father demanded the marriage as a condition to pay off all the noble's debts and provide the necessary financial support. She believes that through this union, the merchant family Portman will finally rise in status and enter the nobility. Stunned by the revelation, Ulrich asks if that means the girl was basically sold to them, receiving only Rhonda's sorrowful silence in response. He falls into despair as he realizes the terrible truth behind his marital happiness, consumed by enormous guilt. He starts to agonize over what his own father was capable of, unable to hold back his emotions. Elric throws open the bedroom door and leaves the worried housekeeper behind, starts to run desperately through the castle corridors, desperate to give explanations. All the kid wants in that moment of pure desperation is to find Tyria to sincerely apologize for what happened. Racing against time, extremely distressed, looking for any excuse or justification that might ease that terrible situation, exhausted from running. The guy needs to lean against the hallway wall while trying to catch his breath. He leans, completely exhausted, but his determination to speak to her keeps him from giving up at that moment. With his heart racing and sweat dripping down his face, he keeps gasping as he approaches her room. Finally, he arrives in front of the grand and luxurious decorated doors of the chamber where she is staying. As he touches the wood to open it, Ulfric notices a small crack open and hears a muffled sound coming from inside. Peeking silently through the crack in the door, he freezes completely when he hears soft sobs. On the other side, the young girl is completely flushed and crying tears of deep sadness. She's curled up on the floor of the dark room, hugging her own legs as she softly cries to herself. The sound of that suffering breaks Rick's heart, who is left in shock at seeing his girlfriend in such a pitiful state. The exact moment he sees her, crying in such a painful way, the guy decides to take a step back and walk away. That's when he made a drastic decision and silently vowed to find a way to call off that miserable marriage. The scene shifts to the next day, where we see Elric's father signing new business documents with all the calm in the world. As the man works calmly in his luxurious office, hurried and noisy footsteps echo outside. Suddenly, Elric bursts through the doors with extreme violence and shouts for his father in a tone of pure defiance. Without a doubt, the kid demands right away that the arranged marriage be called off once and for all. He confronts his father directly about the fact that Tyria was bought just to save his family from financial ruin. With eyes full of desperation and anguish, the young man begs from the bottom of his heart for his father to change his mind. However, the man just slowly turns and says his son's name in an extremely cold and cutting way. He stares at the boy with a terrifying expression and orders him to stop acting like a spoiled brat immediately. The father stands tall and reminds his son that they now belong to the nobility and that he needs to start acting like it. That extremely cold look, with no trace of affection, hits the boy like a physical blow. This makes Elric remember with great bitterness the harsh and sad reality in which he always lived in that house. After all, he always bore the burden of being seen by his own father as the son guilty for his mother's death on the day of childbirth. To the patriarch, Elric was never more than a mere puppet, a tool without a will of his own, used only to secure the family's rise. Faced with so much coldness and contempt, the kid realizes that there's no more room for dialogue and decides to turn his back on his father for good. Finally, he accepts the painful truth that he never meant anything more than a mere tool of interest to his own father. It's at that moment of deep disappointment that he makes the firm decision that he needs to disappear from that house as soon as possible. He would do it as much to free the poor girl, who was sold for money, as to screw over his father's grand plans once and for all. To make his escape successful, the young man decides to leave behind the Portman surname and everything that tied him to that ambitious family. That very night, an extremely heavy rain begins to fall mercilessly over the vast wheat fields of the region. Under the heavy storm, the kid starts his escape journey without looking back, carrying only a backpack and a sword at his waist. As he walks in the darkness, he still wonders about the real reasons that made Tyria cry so much in that room. Elric wonders if she was suffering from being sold, from leaving her homeland, or if she was crying just from hating the idea of marrying him. But he knows very well that, no matter how much he tries to find those answers, there's no turning back from his decision. With that, he shakes off those doubts and decides to press on with his escape into the unknown. Many years pass, and the story takes us to an enormous and imposing stone fortress under a stormy gray sky. A muscular man with graying hair notices an approach and asks, surprised, "Who's out there in the rain?" Seeing the mysterious young man standing before him, the man asks if he really came to this fortress to become a mercenary. With a look filled with determination and without showing any sign of doubt, the kid responds with a very firm yes. Then he introduces himself using his new war name and says that from that day on, he will only go by that. Leaving his past completely behind, he spent 10 long years surviving on the battlefield and wielding his sword with relentless ferocity. Drifting constantly from one war zone to another, he ended up being known in every corner as the feared sword demon. All that terrifying reputation was, in fact, the only secret left of that fragile boy who once went by the name Elric. Now, he gazes at the golden horizon after the end of yet another brutal fight, reflecting on his long, bloody journey. Despite his ruthless reputation, his gaze still bears a deep melancholy about the lonely path he chose to follow. In the distance, a massive enemy horde starts to form up in battle formation for the inevitable onslaught. However, the fearless warrior stands completely alone in the gorge to face the advancing enemy army. He grips his heavy, gleaming blade, which shines intensely against the last rays of the setting sun. In the blink of an eye, the warrior makes a swift and overwhelming move, slicing through enemies with precise strikes. With the stone stained with blood, Kasa keeps a cold and totally focused expression on his own survival amidst the chaos. The story then takes us inside a bustling tavern, filled with people chatting happily about the latest events. The owner of the establishment looks surprised towards the entrance, hearing the doorbell ring softly. Then he warmly welcomes the new customer who just walked in, leaning on a cane. This is Elric, now dressed in plain civilian clothes and using a cane to move due to his injuries, walking with a serious expression and visibly limping. He crosses the room in silence under the watchful and curious gaze of several patrons drinking there. Some of the patrons recognize him right away and start whispering if he isn't the legendary sword demon who was lost in the distant battlefields. They look astonished and wonder if the feared warrior ended up with some irreparable injury to his leg to be in such a weakened state. Elric approaches the bar, and the bartender, worried about his condition, asks what could have happened to leave him crippled like that. The young man downplays the situation, explaining that it was just a minor battle incident, something the assistant considers quite common in the life of any veteran fighter. As he picks up a newspaper to read, the young man calmly remarks that he will have to live with this physical limitation for a good part of his life. Suddenly, Elric grips the newspaper with extreme force as he comes across a shocking and unexpected news on the page he was reading. The tavern owner notices the drastic change in the customer's mood and calls out to him, frightened by that sudden outburst of silent fury. But the young man is completely paralyzed, his red eyes fixed on the newspaper article. The news just had his deceased father, Owen Portman, formerly featured in the obituary. Shortly after, the shrill whistle of a steam train echoes through the mountains under the golden light of the sunset. The locomotive speeds along the tracks, slicing through the beautiful mountain landscape of that peaceful region. Sitting comfortably in his cabin, Elric thoughtfully watches the vastness quickly passing by the window of the carriage. Asazian bitterly reflects on how his deceased father's face was faintly and forgottenly imprinted in the corner of that newspaper clipping. The official announcement confirmed the death of Ben Portman, the person who left the most painful and traumatic scars on his entire past. Drek remembers when he ran away from home at 14 and how, deep down, he still held the naive hope that his father would somehow look for him. He acknowledges that, being just a scared and immature kid at the time, that feeling was childish and not very practical. However, even looking back today, he still thinks that that glimmer of hope wasn't entirely unfounded in his child's mind. After all, despite having been treated as just a puppet of interest and his father being the indirect cause of his mother's death, there was still an inevitable bond between the two. He knows that no matter how much he tried to deny it with his immense resentment, he was, after all, that man's blood heir. In some corner of his bitter heart, the kid desperately wished his father had shown at least a shred of genuine affection for him before the end. But he knows that was just a childish illusion, and now that the man is gone, the very target of his resentment has simply ceased to exist in the world. He feels that all that's left is a cowardly version of himself, using his father's death as a mere excuse to sneak back to his childhood home. With his heart heavy with regrets and a deep void in his chest, the blacksmith hears the train's brakes screech as it approaches his old hometown. The train finally stops at his final destination, Weaving Station, the exact place where all his suffering began 10 years ago. The wind gently blows through the vast gleaming golden wheat fields under the rosy evening sky. Elric steps onto the platform and takes a deep breath of the air from his old homeland, with a rather melancholic and distant look about him. He walks slowly down the beaten dirt path between the wheat fields, noticing that absolutely nothing has changed there after an entire decade of absence. The streets remain peaceful and painted with the characteristic reddish hue of autumn leaves, which fall silently from the trees. See the locals working on the harvest with no hurry in that scene that seems extremely cozy, but at the same time very distant from his violent reality of wars. The village's tranquil atmosphere shows no trace of the unbearable life or death tension he faced daily on the battlefield. Unbearable life or death struggle that he faced daily on the battlefield. He continues his slow walk, keeping time with the rhythmic and painful sound of his limping steps hitting the ground. Suddenly, a cool breeze touches his face, bringing him an instant sense of peace, and a subtle smile to his lips after so long. The vast fields of wheat, which had always been the family Vivian's greatest symbol, remain completely untouched by the passage of time. This golden sight brings back happy memories of his youth, when he would play hide and seek carefree with the other boys from the village. She also fondly remembers when she would get scolded by the housekeepers for coming back with her clothes all muddy after her daily adventures. With each new step on that rustic path, memories of the past seem to resurface before his eyes with astonishing clarity and vividness. He mutters thoughtfully about the power of these memories, trying to understand the conflicting feelings that still stir in his wounded heart. But the warrior's slow steps are suddenly interrupted when he spots something unexpected up ahead on the dusty path. The young man focuses his keen gaze in the direction of some feminine voices that begin to softly echo through the wheat field. He can't help but think of sweet Miss Tyria and wonder if she has lived well and happily all these years he has been away. Rick smiles to himself, imagining that someone so beautiful and charming must have been wooed and married a good guy of high class. It is at that moment that he notices an extremely delicate hand gently touching the golden wheat stalks very close to where he is. His eyes widen in absolute shock as he hears a worker shout loudly in the name of Tyria in the middle of the plantation. He turns shakily and sees, a few meters away, Tyria herself carrying a bundle of harvested wheat, while a doe runs worriedly to try to help her with the weight. The housekeeper is startled to notice the presence of that strange man with a cane watching them, and turns with a curious and apprehensive expression towards Elric. Elric stares intently at the young woman up close, barely able to believe he's standing in front of Tyria again after all this time. Just then, the maid rushes over, shouting worriedly for her mistress as she hurries along. The young man is extremely confused, wondering how the hell she can still be living so simply on that farm, totally disbelieving the situation. Elric asks why she is still there. Something's up? Thorpe responds that the reason she's there is because she's still his legal wife. Hearing that calm statement, the young man feels like the biggest fool in the world for all his reckless, youthful attitudes. He realizes how naive he was to believe that marriage. It would simply be annulled with his sudden disappearance. After all, if that arranged marriage could be undone so easily, it never would have been sold to his family in the first place. It's questioned if his selfish actions in the past ended up trapping and robbing her of the last drop of freedom of that poor woman. The young man realizes that, in the end, he was unable to act in a mature and proper way with the people around him. He realizes that he miserably failed to protect his own pride, and worse yet, to give any kind of support or respect to the woman he had married. He also sees himself as nothing more than a coward for having run away from his family responsibilities in such a childish way. While he spent 10 years fighting and swinging his sword aimlessly on the battlefields, she silently bore all the consequences. He wonders how lonely, difficult, and painful her life must have been over all these years of total abandonment in the mansion. Even if he feels he urgently needs to apologize for everything, the young man starts to doubt his own real intentions. He wonders if he even has the right to do that, and if she would even be willing to accept an apology from someone who left her behind. Completely awkward and pretty embarrassed, the young man tries to stutter out some words to try and start a conversation. Tyria barely glances at him in absolute silence, keeping a calm and unreadable expression under her large straw hat. Without showing any sign of irritation, she practically suggests that they both go inside the house to talk about the matter better. Right away, she starts to walk calmly back to the mansion, letting him follow right behind her down the tiara path. Elric silently accompanies her, feeling extremely tense and uncomfortable with her unexpected calm. Deep down, he desperately wished that she would at least get mad or yell at him for all the pain he caused. After all, her extreme indifference seemed to hide a sorrow much worse than any outburst of rage. As they walk towards the grand estate under the crimson sky, he keeps wondering what the hell is really waiting for him from this point on. Suddenly, he notices movement coming from the entrance of the house and quickly turns with a look of surprise. The young man's eyes widen as he spots a very familiar figure. Coming out of the mansion's front door, Tyria keeps moving towards the entrance, while the young man lags a bit behind on the dirt path due to his injured leg. She notices the obvious hesitation of the young man, stops her steps, and asks gently if he won't join her inside. Caught off guard by the unexpected gentleness in her voice, Elric swallows hard and tries to quickly compose himself from the shock. He says he's already coming and grips his cane tightly, hurrying his clumsy steps to try and catch up to her. Finally, they enter the imposing mansion, and one of the young maids politely asks them to wait a moment while she goes to call the butler. Tyria waits patiently in the entrance hall, still holding tightly to the golden sheaf of wheat she harvested from the field. The young deer quickly retreats, opening the grand inner doors to follow the order given. Elric takes advantage of the brief moment of silence to scrutinize the luxurious surroundings around him. He's blown away to realize that even after 10 years away, the interior of the imposing mansion remains absolutely identical to what it was before. Every little decorative detail of the place evokes deep and nostalgic memories of his turbulent childhood there. Even the exact number of windows and the location of each stain on the walls come to mind with stunning clarity. The nostalgia is so overwhelming, and with the sense that time has simply frozen in place, the young man lets out a soft, subtle smile. However, his moment of reflection is suddenly interrupted when a firm female voice asks who he is. Elric turns around, surprised, in the direction of that stern voice that sounds extremely familiar to his childhood ears. A stylish woman in glasses and formal maid's attire slowly approaches and seriously asks who he came to visit. The young man is in absolute shock to realize that the woman in front of him is none other than Rhonda, his former trusted housekeeper. He realizes that even after an entire decade, she hasn't changed a bit in her stern appearance and impeccable posture. With a slight smile on his lips, the young man casually asks if she really doesn't recognize him. Rhonda stares at him intently, clearly confused by such a personal question coming from a total stranger with a cane. However, as she focuses her eyes on the young man's striking features, she finally recognizes who he is, and her eyes widen in complete shock of recognition. Honda is completely stunned and stammers young master as she watches the young man smile back at her with affection. With trembling hands and tears in her eyes, she asks if the man in front of her is really her beloved Elric. He wraps her in a warm embrace and gently says that it's been a long time and that he's finally back home. Holding back tears, the devoted housekeeper is overcome with emotion to confirm that the young man she helped raise has returned safe and sound. She remarks in amazement that he changed so much in these 10 years that it was almost impossible to recognize him at first. The young man smiles gently and agrees that he really has changed a lot in this time, making that reaction perfectly understandable. But suddenly, an extremely intriguing thought strikes Elric, leaving him pensive and confused. He remembers perfectly when he would say, as he stated earlier, that he continued on the farm because he was his lawful wife. The young man reflects on the fact that he is now a rugged man who spent 10 years fighting in bloody battlefields. Rhonda notices the young man's sudden distraction and asks worriedly if something is wrong with him at that moment. He concludes that his appearance has changed so much that even the housekeeper, who cared for him like a mother, had immense difficulty recognizing him at first. Knowing this, the young man wonders how it would be possible for the girlfriend to know who he was without any doubt. Sweat trickles down his forehead as he tries to unravel this big mystery surrounding Tyria's behavior. He just can't figure out how the girl was able to recognize his face at first sight after so much time apart. Time passes and the scene shifts to the interior of a luxurious room in the mansion, where the white curtains sway gently with the breeze. Tyria stands, facing the enormous glass window, silently watching the beautiful sunset landscape. She listens intently to the conversation between Elric and the housekeeper that is happening right below, in the garden. The young man feels like he's being watched from up there. He quickly turns around and ends up quite embarrassed by the situation. Noticing she had been caught spying, the young woman steps back startled and puts her hand to her chest, her heart racing. She tries to catch her breath, leaning against the wall, while her face turns completely red with embarrassment. The story then highlights the large and striking scar that Elric bears on the back of his neck, as well as focusing on his long brown hair and his deep gaze that bears marks of suffering and pity. Absolutely nothing seemed to have changed in the essence and the gaze of that boy she knew so well in her childhood. Later, Elric relaxes in a luxurious hot tub, but he's still intrigued by the mystery of the recognition. While taking his bath, he tries to find some plausible explanation for how his wife could have recognized him so easily after 10 years. Finally, he decides to get out of the warm water, making a slight noise as he steps onto the wet bathroom floor. The young man puts on his white robe and starts to tie the belt, but he gets a huge fright when he hears the door suddenly open. He turns his face, confused, opening his eyes wide at the unexpected presence that suddenly appears before him. It's Tyria, who calmly enters the room, wearing only a white towel wrapped around her body after a bath. On noticing his presence in the same private space, her cheeks instantly turn red with embarrassment, desperate at being caught. The girl tries to cover herself more and starts to stutter out several apologies for the misunderstanding. Seeing that she is about to cry from so much embarrassment, Elric tries to calm her down quickly so she doesn't panic. He stammers nervously and begs for her not to shed tears because of that awkward situation. But the tense and shy atmosphere between the two newlyweds seems to only increase with each passing second in that steamy room. To make matters worse, a young red-headed maid opens the door holding a basket of laundry and lets out a deafening scream upon seeing the intimate scene, completely panicked by the flagrant display. The maid drops everything to the floor and runs as fast as she can down the mansion's hallways. She screams desperately for help from outside, unable to understand what the hell is going on in that room. In an extremely quick reaction to protect his wife from prying eyes, Elric pulls Tyria close and hugs her tightly. However, that unexpected and sudden physical contact leaves both of them with their faces even redder with pure embarrassment. With tears welling up in her eyes from the shock, the young woman can only stammer her maid's name in panic, trying to navigate the situation any way she can. The young man tries to come up with the lame excuse that he barely held her to keep her from falling on the slippery floor. The story then takes us back to the dark times of Gredra at the Chevort defense line, where the 5th Regiment of Guards is stationed. One of the fearless fighters scans the horizon with a sharp, relentless gaze amidst a heavy downpour. From the enemy ranks emerges the feared knight of the Imperial Army's vanguard, LeBron, leading the elite assault group with a macabre smile on his face. With war cries echoing from all sides, the troops receive orders to charge ahead and annihilate the local defense forces. LeBron taunts the enemies, shouting and raising his massive sword, promising to slice each and every one of them without any mercy in an extremely brutal attack. The mighty enemy commander starts mowing down several guards at once, splattering blood across the wet ground. Desperate in the face of such a power imbalance, the surviving soldiers shout that it's impossible to defeat that armored warrior. With no other viable alternative to prevent a massacre, the officers order the immediate retreat of all units behind the defensive line. But against the tide of the general panic, the fearless Kasha walks calmly towards the danger with his heavy sword resting on his shoulder. The enemy soldiers watch the mysterious warrior from afar and wonder if he's just another insignificant mercenary hired by Chever. Completely oblivious to the whispers of the adversaries, the young man assumes his combat stance and raises his heavy sword. Asa keeps his cold gaze focused on the opponents, showing an impressive calm in the face of the impending battle. Without wasting any time, one of the fearless Imperial soldiers charges at him ferociously, sword drawn, and a sadistic smile on his face. However, the protagonist blocks the attack with extreme ease and is already gearing up to unleash a devastating counterattack. He holds his massive blade with absolute firmness, maintaining an unflappable expression as he dominates the confrontation. With a precise and lethal move, he strikes the enemy's neck, causing blood to gush intensely in the midst of the rain. The wounded soldier drops his weapon and falls to his knees, utterly defeated by the overwhelming power of the young man. Casa spins his sword quickly and decapitates the opponent with a single clean and wicked cut. The bloodied helmet of the soldier rolls through the mud in front of his comrades, spreading panic among the Imperial troops. The other soldiers, witnessing the scene, freeze in sheer terror and begin to sweat bullets at the sight of that monstrous force. Standing next to the fallen body, the warrior solemnly introduces himself as Kasha, the legendary mercenary knight of Chavoro. He dares the remaining enemies to advance if they have the guts, assuring that he will slice through every last one of them without a doubt. But suddenly, a chill runs down his spine as he feels a deadly threat quickly approaching. The protagonist reacts in the same instant and activates his mana shield to try and protect himself from the surprise attack. However, a powerful projectile violently tears through his protective barrier and slams into his left knee, sending a wave of excruciating pain. The young man drops to his knees and uses his own sword as a crutch to keep from collapsing on the blood-soaked ground. Casa grits his teeth and looks up with great difficulty, trying to identify the source of that devastating shot. At the top of a nearby cliff, two mysterious figures silently watch the battle unfold below. It's a couple in eccentric outfits and masks, with the woman holding a still smoking sniper rifle. The young man wakes up startled, eyes wide open, letting out a sigh of pure panic after reliving that terrible nightmare. Rick quickly sits up in bed, drenched in cold sweat brandishing a knife defensively against the emptiness. He's breathing heavily, heart racing, still trying to shake off the traumatic memories of the war. The young man looks at the knife in his trembling hands as he tries to get his bearings and calm his fight instincts. Slowly, the sunlight that floods the imposing and luxurious room begins to bring a sense of reality to the atmosphere. Finally, he realizes he's no longer on the battlefield and that he made it back home safe. Suddenly, knocks at the door startle him, and he points his gun towards the noise out of pure reflex. Outside, a polite voice asks if the young master is already awake, while he remains tense in the enormous bed. Elric hesitates for a brief moment and keeps quiet, trying to control his ragged breathing before responding. Finally, he responds calmly that yes, he is awake. As he says he just woke up, the young man quickly hides the knife behind his back to avoid raising suspicions. One of the dedicated servants enters the room bringing a wooden container full of water so he can wash up. The protagonist remembers that as he asks for cold water to clean himself, a container overflowing with freezing water was delivered to him without delay. He puts on incredibly soft and comfortable clothes, feeling as if he's barely wearing anything compared to the heavy armor before. As he looks at himself in the mirror leaning on his cane, Elric reflects that living surrounded by so much luxury seems like a reward he doesn't deserve. The young man tries to force a smile at his own reflection, but the resulting expression feels strange and unnatural to him. He starts to walk slowly and wonders if all that time of suffering on the battlefield ended up turning his face into stone. The housekeeper opens the door and compliments the young master's look, immediately suggesting they start the day with a good breakfast. She stands with her usual impeccable and elegant posture, waiting for him to accompany her. Noticing the young man's limp, the housekeeper asks worriedly what happened to his leg, and he makes up the lie that he fell down a steep hill out of pure distraction. In his mind, the protagonist remembers how he was injured in the war and acknowledges that he could never reveal that a bullet is lodged in his knee to avoid causing unnecessary worries. Honda remarks with amusement that he's still as accident-prone as ever, causing the young man to blush and remember the awkward misunderstanding from the day before. As the two walk through the mansion's hallways, soft footsteps begin to echo, and a highly anticipated figure emerges towards them. The delicate profile and long golden hair of the young bride are revealed in the soft light coming through the windows. Hyria appears before him in a dazzling way and asks sweetly if he managed to have a good night's sleep. However, the sight of his wife instantly reminds the young man of the moment he saw her coming out of the bathroom, wrapped in nothing but a towel. Completely embarrassed and red-faced, he can barely manage to come up with a decent response after being called a pervert because of that incident. The young maid Marie points her finger accusingly and shouts that he's a real pervert, while Tyria looks awkwardly from the back. Having no patience for the commotion, Kronda lands a solid smack on Marie's head and scolds her harshly for being caught snooping around the bathroom. As she drags the noisy maid away by the neck, the housekeeper politely wishes the young man an enjoyable stay at the mansion. Feeling a bit uncomfortable with the heated welcome, Eustace clears his throat to try and dispel the heavy atmosphere, forces a friendly smile, and wishes his wife a good day, casually mentioning that he slept very well. As he takes in the cozy dining room, the young man notices Marie's absence and asks for the name of the new maid, not remembering her from his last visit. However, Cassie spits out what she was eating and slams her hand on the table in shock when Tyria mentions the incident where the maid called him a pervert. Is expected to wrap this up, the protagonist gestures frantically with his hands and insists that she doesn't need to worry about it. He grips the handle of his cane firmly, trying to regain his composure in the awkward situation. His face visibly flushed, Elric tries to explain that it was just a silly curiosity, having never seen the girl before. Tyria gives him a piercing, skeptical look, not entirely convinced by his rushed excuse, a tense silence hanging in the air. Then it settles in the air as the couple starts to have breakfast side by side. The young bride savors her food calmly and chews slowly, seeming oblivious to the tension in the air. Suddenly, she opens her mouth to talk about a sensitive issue, putting the young guy on edge instantly. Seizing the moment, Elric takes the initiative and decides to finally address the terrible misunderstanding from the day before. Lydia asks timidly if he's referring to what happened in the bathroom, feeling her cheeks flush at the same time. The young man tries to stammer out a formal apology, but she quickly interrupts him with a nervous gesture to end the conversation, still quite withdrawn. The girl just asks him to focus on eating and finish his breakfast quickly. Lydia looks away and clutches her own dress with trembling hands, completely awkward with the whole intimate situation. She remains in complete silence, her face red, unable to look her husband directly in the eyes. Feeling the atmosphere getting heavier by the second, the protagonist rubs the back of his neck and curses. He second-guesses his own idea of bringing the matter to light, remembering how he was dressed in just a robe in the bathhouse, and realizes he ended up oversharing. Elric bitterly recalls the countless deep scars that cover his body, wondering if she ended up being shocked by the marks of his violent past at war. The two continue eating in an almost deafening silence, where only the sound of the cutlery against the plates can be heard. The young man deeply regrets not just ignoring what happened, feeling that this awkward atmosphere will drive both of them crazy. To get out of there as fast as possible, he starts shoveling food into his mouth extremely quickly and almost desperately. With his cheeks totally full, the young man hurriedly wipes his mouth while his wife watches in complete shock at his sudden lack of manners, giving him a thumbs up. The kid mumbles with a mouth full that he's out of here and wants her to enjoy the rest of her meal. He jumps up and exits the dining room, closing the wooden door gently behind him with a soft click. Darius stares at the closed door for a few moments and lets out a shy sigh at her husband's unexpected attitude, her face still flushed. She looks out the sunny window and silently wishes he has a nice day. Stepping into the main hall after coffee, Erlich notices that the vast Portman estate is already bustling with activity and filled with servants at work. Under the watchful eye of the housekeeper, the young man goes around greeting each of the household staff, who welcome him with genuine smiles and lots of warmth. However, one of the servants boldly asks if it's true that he tried to attack the mistress yesterday, causing another employee to scold him, saying that the two are married and praising the young master's virility. Suddenly, young Marie bursts into the hallway, screaming at the top of her lungs that the protagonist is nothing but a huge pervert. She shouts indignantly for all the other employees to wake up and stop defending the young man's suspicious behavior. The young maid continues her rant, saying he vanished for 10 years only to come back with this kind of behavior. But she's cut off when a firm hand grips her shoulder. It's the old man Baldio, who appears smiling and asks her not to be so hard on the young master, as she is still too new to understand these things. The seasoned employee explains casually that the main duty of any noble is to secure a legitimate heir for the family line. Eldio argues enthusiastically that Elric was merely faithfully fulfilling his marital duties in Banjo's house, and that he proved to be a true noble by not forgetting his duties. Even after a decade away, the young man is completely mortified by the awkward conversation, while Marie continues to shout that he is the worst of the depraved. The friendly gentleman ignores the girl's protest and asks eagerly if the young master has finally come home, causing Elric to let out a rather awkward laugh. Thrusting the end of his cane with force, the protagonist reflects in silence that, in reality, he still hasn't made any decision about his future. He knows that his serious knee injury will force him to stay in the mansion for a while, but he wonders how he could act as the rightful lord of that beautiful property, surrounded by golden wheat fields after so many years away. Trying to change the subject, Eldrick says he needs to take care of some business now, and that they'll talk better later, receiving a respectful greeting from Aldio, who acknowledges his return. Right away, the young master orders the seasoned employee to ready the carriage for his immediate departure. A short time later, the vehicle begins to glide smoothly along the dirt road that cuts through the vast golden fields of the farm. From the middle of the wheat field, Tyria silently watches the carriage slowly move away towards the exit of the property. She holds her large straw hat against the gentle breeze of the day, keeping a thoughtful and melancholic gaze as she watches the horizon. Aerial view. The carriage continues its lonely journey down the road, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn that cover the region. The vehicle finally stops at an isolated spot on the hill, and Elric steps down to walk slowly with the help of his cane. The young man gazes at the silent landscape with an expression full of melancholy, and mutters to himself that it's been a really long time. He stands before the imposing stone tomb of a Ben Portnell and whispers the word father with deep sadness, facing the gravestone under the bright light of the sky. Standing before the headstone, the protagonist silently reflects that he used to harbor deep resentment towards his deceased father. However, he admits that he never wanted their reunion to happen in such a cold and melancholic way. Ben Portman had been an extremely driven man who elevated the family lineage from mere merchants to the most important guild in Weven. But his relentless coldness also earned him countless enemies throughout his life. The young man wonders if his father ever gave him a genuine smile or a single word of affection, concluding that he should have lived a little longer if he wanted to keep up his villainous act until the end. He fixes his eyes on the shield carved into the tombstone and silently regrets that his father had to go so soon. With a soft sigh, Elric decides to look away from the grave and prepares to turn his back on that place under the blue sky. The young man admits to himself that he no longer carries the pain and resentment of the past that used to torment his heart. The young man then slowly turns and catches Haldio's attention, who was patiently waiting a little further back. He asks straight up how his father died, and a loyal servant replies that the cause was a severe heart condition that struck him. Elric is stunned to learn that the deceased hid the truth about his health condition until the very end, with only the personal doctor and Alio himself aware of the situation. The employee continues the story, explaining that, sensing his final days approaching, Abend poured all his strength into wrapping up and liquidating his businesses. With a slight ironic smile, the young man comments that he finds the employee a curious figure and asks what he saw in that cold man to maintain such loyalty. Without hesitation, Elio smiles back and responds in a humorous tone that he did it all for the money, questioning what other reason he could have. The protagonist confronts him with suspicion and notices that he still hasn't asked the most important question of all. He's talking about the fate of all the assets and wealth that the deceased liquidated in a hurry before his untimely death. The young man keeps a serious expression as he awaits the revelation about the whereabouts of the family's immense fortune. The old employee then reveals that all the inheritance amassed by the father was left entirely to him, the rightful heir. The carriage resumes its journey and advances slowly along the beaten earth road, which cuts through the beautiful autumn forest. Already settled inside the vehicle, Elric asks the coachman if his father really didn't leave any formal written will. Alio replies that the deceased wasn't the type to do something like that and confirms there are only a few written instructions about the division, offering to show them if he's curious. Gripping his cane tightly, the young man listens to the employee admit that the true intentions of the deceased remain a big mystery to everyone. The coachman adds that the matter was handled with a coldness never before seen by the old boss, leaving the protagonist quite pensive. As the carriage crosses the golden plantation, the old man advises the young man to take all the time he needs to ponder the fate of the inheritance. The young man fixes his red gaze on the landscape and starts to connect the dots about his family's current situation. An intriguing question arises in his mind as he gazes at the wheat field through the carriage window. Elric wonders why his wife is still at the mansion, since the arranged marriage should have been annulled after his 10-year absence. Aldio comments from the outside that marriage was purely political, serving as a business transaction disguised as a union between two noble families. The young man questions if that fact would be sufficient justification, but is interrupted by the elder, who remembers a very important detail that he had forgotten to mention. Reveals that the Portman lineage has now ascended to the title of hereditary barony, and that this prestigious honor will be transferred to the young man, so he may assume the inheritance. The employee stresses that the entire fortune belongs exclusively to him by right, and not to the young lady who lives on the property. The carriage finally pulls up in front of the main entrance of the imposing and luxurious family mansion. As he steps out of the carriage, Elric reflects that if money were Tyria's only motivation, she would have left a long time ago, considering it's been a year since her father passed. He concludes that if she wanted to, the girl could have called the fortune as a procurator and left, which proves that her staying in the property was an entirely personal choice. The young master asks the coachman if he knows the reason that led his wife to make such an unusual decision. Aldio sighs and explains that the young lady is an extremely private woman, admitting that they were never close enough to share intimate confidences. Describes the bride as a person of haughty nobility and difficult approach, making it impossible for a simple servant to question her motives. Rich agrees that she seems like someone difficult to deal with and points out that she is still a complete stranger to him, since the two have only met in person once. The old man gently pats the horse and wisely muses that, in reality, practically every arranged marriage starts out this way. The young man starts to climb the stone steps with difficulty, leaning all his injured weight on the cane. At the top of the stairs, he finds Tigria leaning against one of the imposing columns, looking quite shy with his approach. The girl hides her red face under the brim of her large hat, showing the obvious discomfort she still feels from the presence of her husband. She grips her own hands tightly against her dress, revealing her extreme shyness and inner turmoil at the sudden encounter. With hesitant steps, the young bride starts to walk slowly towards the entrance of the residence. Noticing her presence, Elric takes the initiative and asks gently if she has just returned from her walk. Caught off guard by his approach, Tyria blushes deeply and asks in surprise when he had arrived from his journey. She holds a small bag of wheat and explains shyly that she just got back from her routine work in the fields. The protagonist feels his own face heat up with his wife's physical proximity and tries to hide his enormous nervousness from her. She suggests in a friendly way that they both go into the mansion together, and the young woman agrees immediately with a slight nod. The couple begins to climb the luxurious internal staircase side by side, maintaining a silence loaded with shyness and tension. Elric glances at her sideways, mentally cursing his own mouth for always creating such weird and awkward dialogues. Walking beside Tyria, Elric thinks that even dressed in simple work clothes, she carries an air of innate and extremely elegant nobility. He wonders if the girl already had that striking and haughty presence 10 years ago, when they got married. The young man vaguely recalls the image of the bride on their wedding day, when she seemed like a timid and radiant noblewoman. Suddenly, a loud noise brings him back to reality and startles him in the middle of his thoughts. Due to his injured leg, the protagonist ends up tripping clumsily and scares his wife, who asks worriedly if he is okay. Drake slams his cane against the ground to regain his balance and avoid an embarrassing fall. Forces a grim smile and lies, saying he's fine, blaming his legs for almost giving out for a second due to the long walk. While wondering how long she's been watching him limp like that, the kid apologizes for not being able to carry the sack of wheat for her because of his busted leg as they keep climbing the stairs. Tyria responds that everything is fine and that she's already gotten used to it, which makes the protagonist feel quite embarrassed and at a loss for having left his wife for so long, and now offering belated apologies. The young bride faces him with her striking golden eyes, conveying a calm and profound seriousness in her gaze. She explains that she meant she got used to the hard work by learning everything directly from the late patriarch of the Portman family. Surprised by the revelation, Elric mutters that acting strictly and demanding the most from others was really his late father's way. The young man recalls that Patriarch Ben Portman was a tireless man who made it a point to personally inspect every sector of his businesses, including the vast wheat plantations. He figures that since his father had sold off all the other ventures, leaving only that farm, it was only natural that he had handed over all the management of the lands to Tyria. Their steps finally fall silent as the two interrupt their climb and stop at the top of the mansion's hallway. With a serious expression, Elric hesitates for a moment before bringing up a rather personal topic with the girl, standing right in front of the imposing portrait of the young patriarch. The young man asks curiously what his father's days were like before he passed away. Tyria responds coldly and directly that she barely learned the chores of the farm with him, admitting that she doesn't remember much of anything besides the professional duties. Hearing his wife's instant response, the protagonist grips the handle of his wooden cane even tighter. It takes courage and asks if, by any chance, his father ever mentioned his name or asked about him during all that time. The girl responds briefly and simply, no, leaving the young man with a faint, sad smile on his lips as he faces the confirmation of his father's coldness. He silently reflects that this was a peculiar combination of an insensitive father and a woman of few words, making any dialogue between them purely commercial. The young man looks away and accepts the sad reality about the distant relationship he had with his deceased father. Tyria asks for permission to leave and return to her daily duties, leaving the young man confused as he thought she had already finished her work for the day. She clarifies that she still needs to go through all the office paperwork, leaving Elric amazed at the amount of responsibility she has. The young master asks, surprised, if she really takes care of the wheat farm during the day and still goes over bureaucratic documents at night, and she timidly confirms that she does. The girl says goodbye, saying she'll see him again at dinner, and he just nods silently as he watches her walk away. The young man remains still in the hallway, watching his wife leave with a gaze filled with anguish. At that moment, Elric is overwhelmed with a deep sense of guilt, realizing that all that workload should have been his responsibility, feeling ashamed for having lived selfishly while she suffered in his place. He reflects that his conscience would feel much lighter if she at least showed some resentment towards him, but the girl never uttered a single word of complaint over all these years. Feeling the weight of his thoughts, the protagonist starts to limp slowly towards the mansion's office. Suddenly, a loud crash from a side hallway catches his attention and makes him stop dead in his tracks. He finds Marie in a mess on the floor after tripping and knocking over a wooden box full of old letters, leaving her in complete despair. Marie cries, not knowing what to do amidst all the mess, while the young man watches her with a confused expression. He bends down to help her pick up the scattered paperwork and takes the opportunity to ask what all those sealed letters are about. The maid responds that they are old letters sent to her mistress, causing Elric to take one of the envelopes to examine more closely. The young master is quite impressed to see the huge amount of correspondence stored in that box. However, the young man's expression changes instantly and his eyes widen as he recognizes the sender of one of the letters. He realizes the letters were sent by the Weaven family, recalling the terms of the political marriage agreement that sealed Tyria's fate. The protagonist opens the letter and starts to read the contents written by the young lady's father. In the text, the man Vivian insists that his daughter give up waiting for a husband who will never return and come home, even offering a new marriage to spare her from more suffering. Elric realizes that his father had transferred the entire family fortune to his name, leaving his daughter-in-law with not a single cent, even after 10 years of exclusive dedication to the Portman estate. He places the letter on the wooden desk of the office, acknowledging that if his wife had taken the entire inheritance for herself, it would have been only fair payment for her years of effort. The young man sits at the table and rests his head in his hands, wondering if the real reason Tyria stayed was just to preserve the legacy left by her deceased father-in-law. However, He still can't figure out why she dedicated herself so much to a cause that wouldn't bring her any financial reward. Elric remains seated in a luxurious office chair, completely absorbed in trying to unravel his wife's true intentions. He fixes his deep red eyes on the void, determined to find the answers he seeks about the girl's behavior. He concludes that if her goal were purely the material inheritance, she would have already taken possession of all the assets and left the mansion nearly a year ago, right after the patriarch's death. The young man leans over the documents scattered on the table, trying to unravel the mystery surrounding the young woman's devotion. He opens one of the desk drawers and finds a pile of stored letters, silently concluding that his suspicions were correct. The young man goes through the letters and realizes that the Weaven family's letters started arriving exactly a year ago. He realizes that all the messages had the same goal of collecting the inheritance that his father has saved for him, and he notices that his wife probably never responded to any of them, since the last letters were begging for a response. Elric lets out a long sigh mixed with a smile, tied to the whole surprising situation. He realizes that Tyria was loyally protecting the Portman family fortune for an heir whose return was uncertain and never guaranteed. Knowing that not even the loyal coachman Audio knew about the existence of those family debts, the young man concludes that the girl must have made a tremendous effort to hide the whole truth. The protagonist realizes with sadness that his wife had been fighting that tough battle all alone for the entire past year. He sees Tyria working from afar, feels and recognizes the impressive strength and determination of that quiet young woman. The young master reflects that he would have no right to blame her if she had simply taken the fortune for herself, wondering why she chose to follow a path of so many trials. Meanwhile, in her private chambers, the young lady settles in front of her vanity and begins to get ready for the meeting requested by her husband. She carefully arranges her blonde hair and ties a light satin ribbon at the back of her head. Wearing an elegant dark blue dress with lace details, Tyria gazes at her own reflection in the mirror with a rather serious and thoughtful expression. Suddenly, the young maid Marie bursts into the room, cheeks flushed with excitement, and announces that the moment has finally arrived. The girl joins hands and excitedly shouts that the young master finally took the initiative to request a private meeting with his wife. The girl makes a playful face and grumbles that while his behavior in the bathhouse was unforgivable, she remembers the words of wisdom from the butler Yahello. Marie loudly insists on having an heir for the family. It would also be wonderful for the mistress herself, leaving Tyria completely red and confused by such audacity. Unable to contain her over-the-top excitement, the maid starts jumping for joy around the room with little hops. She suddenly lunges forward and grabs the skirt of her mistress's luxurious blue dress with great force. On her knees on the rug, Marie dramatically begs for the mistress to follow the experienced butler's advice. The maid dramatically sheds tears and warns that the young man is a depraved scoundrel who might run away from home at any moment, having abandoned her in the past, insisting that the best thing to do is for both of them to finally come together. With a hilarious and exaggerated expression, the maid screams at the top of her lungs for the girl to run to bed with her husband to get a baby on the way. Marie starts to hatch a miraculous plan to have two babies that are spitting images of the mistress to prevent either of them from inheriting the young master's runaway and perverted personality, causing the cold sweat of shame to break out on Tyria. Fortunately for the young lady, firm knocks on the door interrupt the endless chatter of the bumbling maid. Outside, the butler Audio politely asks if she is ready for the meeting, and she hurriedly replies that she is already leaving the room. The firm footsteps of Tyria and the butler begin to echo down the imposing wooden hallway as they make their way to the meeting room. The girl walks down the stairs, anxiously wondering what the conversation would be about, since this was the first time he had requested a private meeting with her. With smooth movements, Audio holds the golden handles and opens the grand double doors for the young lady's entrance. The seasoned employee solemnly announces the arrival of the boss, while Elric waits patiently seated at the table. The young master, who was calmly sipping a cup of tea by the large sunlit window, looks up and gives her a warm welcome. Lyria enters the elegant tea room with calm steps, her face slightly red with shyness. The click of her heels echoes through the room as she approaches the tea table set for them. The young man takes a final sip of his drink, thoughtfully, as he watches his wife settle across from him. From above, the couple positions themselves in the center of the grand salon, furnished with classic furniture and bathed in sunlight. Without beating around the bush, Elric places the letter on the table and sincerely apologizes for opening the mail without permission, explaining that he found them by chance, scattered in the mess made by the maid. He taps him on the shoulder and asks straight up if he could question her about the contents of those mysterious letters. Iria's eyes widen, and she lets out a soft gasp of surprise, realizing her big secret has been discovered by her husband. She immediately lowers her head, letting the shadow of her hair cover her face, overcome by a sudden anguish. In silent panic, the young woman fears that the young man will misunderstand her true intentions and come to see her as a greedy, ruthless woman interested only in the inheritance. The young woman breaks the silence, calmly remarking that she found out she spent the whole last year solemnly ignoring all those bills from her family. He confronts her seriously and confesses that he only called her here to get an answer as to why she had protected his inheritance so fiercely, even without any guarantee that he would ever return alive. Elric points out that she could have easily taken possession of all the wealth for herself, and no one could have stopped her or judged her for it. Deep down, the young man understands that to her, he was nothing more than a complete stranger after a decade of total estrangement. He wonders why this strange young girl insists on protecting the estate of an absent husband remains an incomprehensible mystery to him. He asks her to reveal the truth about why she refused to return to her homeland in Weaving, even in the face of her father's insistence. With her face partially shadowed and her lips sealed, the girl murmurs the family's last name firmly and solemnly. She lifts her head with determination and declares with her striking golden eyes that her official name is now Portman. The young woman declares with pride and authority that she is no longer Mrs. Weaving, but the rightful matriarch and protector of all the Portman estate. Without giving time for any response, she abruptly stands up and apologizes for needing to rush off as she still has many obligations pending at the farm. The young lady turns her back and strides swiftly and decisively across the room, leaving her untouched tea on the table. Elric remains seated in a chair, a bead of sweat on his brow, completely stunned and at a loss for how to react to his wife's imposing and unexpected behavior. He silently watches the empty space left by the girl in front of the sunny window, trying to process the impact of that powerful declaration of loyalty. Elric asks his wife, why did she decide to protect his share of the inheritance, even without any guarantee that he would ever come back alive, highlighting that she could have easily kept the entire fortune for herself. Lyria hesitates for a moment and starts to stammer shyly, trying to find the right words to answer her husband's question. She swallows hard and her cheeks flush deeply as she tries to keep her nerves in check, looking up at him with determination. The young woman faces him with her striking golden eyes and responds simply that she acts this way because she is his wife. Meanwhile, in the office, Elric holds a small knife and stabs it thoughtfully into the wooden panel of the wall. Sitting in his chair, the young master reflects in silence on everything that happened and his companion's true motivations. He remembers the girl's strong declaration, stating that she now belongs to the Portman family and that she will assume the responsibility and duty to protect that property. The sound of the leaf hitting the wall echoes through the fourth silent while he continues lost in his thoughts. Elric wonders if the true feeling behind that cold and formal response was merely the sense of duty of a noble woman. He realizes that she protected all the remaining assets, not out of greed, but to fulfill her duty, an altruistic attitude that makes him instantly recall an old acquaintance from the past. The young man recalls the figure of Elvis Graham, a man who deeply marked his military career. Elric remembers that he met Elvis on the battlefields as the third son of an influential family who had hired him as a mercenary during the territorial war. Despite securing victory with few casualties, the triumph was not complete, as Elvis ended up suffering severe injuries that left him permanently in a wheelchair. Even unable to fight, the noble maintained a haughty demeanor and insisted that he needed to keep up his social role. He used to say that those born into nobility carried the burden of setting an example for others, and that this war was just the stage for him to fulfill his duty. At the time, Elric even questioned him if it wasn't contradictory to act like that, being just the son of a concubine and half-commoner. With a sarcastic smile, Elvis replied that he preferred to see himself as half noble, and that by fulfilling half of his duties, he ended up sacrificing half of his own body keeping his promise. The man retired from combat to live a peaceful life and ended up getting married a few years later. Back to reality, the protagonist removes the leaf from the wooden wall with the firm movement. He reflects to himself on the weight of the words responsibility and duty that seem to guide his wife's actions. Even if he acknowledges that he will never be able to repay Tyria's 10 years of sacrifice, the young man knows he's not completely helpless in this situation. Aware that the greedy family will keep sending letters demanding the inheritance, he figures that their apparent physical absence is due to some obstacle and not lack of will. Knowing that his wife will never reveal her deepest feelings, even if he insists on the matter, Elric decides to act on his own. Fortunately, the young man plans an alternative route to uncover the whole truth behind that story once and for all. With that, a carriage heads towards the luxurious Weaving estate. Elric arrives at the iron gates of the imposing mansion and concludes that the best strategy at the moment is to make a direct approach. The young master struts through the garden, taking in the grandeur of the place and feeling confident for the showdown ahead. Meanwhile, inside the residence, the hosts have already been informed of the visit and sneer about the audacity of the young man in finally showing his face. The guy Vivian and his wife hurry through the hallways, spewing venom about their son-in-law, calling him a miserable lowlife. The Baroness demands furiously that he should have disappeared forever, and accuses the young man of having returned just to sniff around and steal their daughter's inheritance. With a dark and greedy look, the man worries about the possibility that the young man might try to claim his legal rights over the fortune left by a Ben. The noble couple quickly makes their way to the drawing room to confront the unwanted visitor. They walk side by side through the lavish halls, determined not to let the kid walk away with the Portman fortune. The Baron shouts irritated, labeling the son-in-law as a piece of trash, only interested in money. The wife agrees completely and adds that the young man wasted an entire decade of Tyria's life, dramatically recalling all the high cost and effort they had to raise the girl. The greedy noble focuses his attention on the valuable inheritance left by the deceased patriarch of the Portman family. They march determined, convinced that they need to seize that fortune to make up for all the supposed wrongs they endured with the sudden movement. The guy grabs the golden handle and opens the door to the meeting room. As they enter, they find Elric elegantly dressed and leaning on his cane, patiently waiting for his in-laws to arrive. The young master bows politely and formally introduces himself as Elric Portman, apologizing sincerely for the long delay in coming to visit them. Arms crossed at the table, the guy quips ironically about the 10-year disappearance, while his wife feigns understanding with a fake smile behind her fan. Without wasting time on formalities, the young man directly mentions that he had the opportunity to read the letters sent to his mansion. The father-in-law finds it ridiculous that the young man only read the message now, but insists on speeding up the conversation, claiming he sent the letter out of pure paternal concern over his daughter's abandonment. He accuses Elric of being a no-good scoundrel for abandoning Tyria after the Weaving family helped elevate the Portmans to nobility, greedily mentioning the huge inheritance left by the deceased patriarch. The man lets out a mocking laugh and openly insults his son-in-law's humble origins, mocking the fact that he's come back lame and questioning his ability and right to manage any fortune. He clears his throat and says arrogantly that since the inheritance was being managed exclusively by Tyria, the kid clearly doesn't have a head for business. On the other side of the table, the noble couple lays their cards on the table, demanding the entire fortune be handed over to Portman as financial compensation for abandoning their daughter. The Weaving patriarch insists that his son-in-law is shameless for wanting to claim the assets, and doubts that he would put the inherited money to any good use. Hiding her greedy smile behind her fan, the Baroness backs her husband and adds that the young man is not fit to manage the lands, falsely lamenting her daughter's suffering. With dark and malicious looks, the noble couple concludes that the best solution is for them to take full control of the fortune, ensuring that they will put every cent to excellent use. Faced with all those absurd demands, Elric barely lets out a long, heavy sigh, feels his eyes burn with fury, and thinks about how the situation is repulsive, realizing that behind all the pointless conversation, the couple's only real goal is to steal the inheritance left by his deceased father, now that Tyria is alone. The young man concludes that the two saw the perfect opportunity to get rich at the expense of someone else's inheritance, not giving a damn about their own daughter's well-being, while trying to seize the lands just to fill their pockets with gold. Overwhelmed by deep disgust, the young master realizes he can't stand to hear even one more word from such repulsive people. Elric closes his eyes to take a deep breath and warns coldly that before anything else, he would like to clarify a point. He faces them firmly and apologizes for not bringing his wife to this meeting, explaining seriously that she is very busy managing the farm tasks at the moment. Baron Joseph Weaven completely loses his patience, slams his fist on the table, and shouts for his son-in-law to stop trying to change the subject, demanding total focus on the discussion about the division of the inheritance. The man shouts furiously for the young man to stop being greedy and hand over the fortune to the two of them soon, questioning if he really thinks it's fair to claim these assets after being away from home for 10 long years. Facing his father-in-law's relentless shouts, accusing him of greed, Elric covers his own face and lets out a sarcastic laugh, repeating the word greedy with utter contempt. He slowly pulls his fingers away, focusing his intense red eyes on the man, and asks in a threatening tone what exactly Joseph intends to do if he decides to act with such greed mentioned. The guy swallows hard and stammers, frightened as his son-in-law repeats the question in an intimidating way, asking what they would do if he decided to take all the wealth for himself. The young man dares his father-in-law to say something and reveal what his reaction would be, mocking the fact that the man has suddenly gone silent right after shouting with so much arrogance. Without giving a chance for answers, Elric slams the table and asks roughly if the noble's proud mouth dried up so quickly in the face of a real confrontation. The man shudders and shouts angrily as he curses the son-in-law, calling him a miserable insolent. The young master faces him coldly and notes that, apparently, his father-in-law finally understood who he was really dealing with. The young man recalls his 10 years of pure survival on the battlefields, reminding himself that there's no need for any dramatic moves or to show off stupid rage against weak opponents. He reflects that, after all, nothing will change the final outcome of that situation, regardless of the meaning he tries to give to his own actions. Elric stares deep into the man's eyes and advises him to keep his mouth shut from that moment on, warning that that would be the best choice, in case the two still want to keep receiving Tyrion's financial support. He lets out a mocking smile and comments on how he finds the whole ridiculous scene funny, created by two people who have absolutely no legal right to his wife's inheritance. The young man rises, leaning on his cane, and turns his back on the two, declaring with authority that the only ones truly consumed by greed here are the in-laws themselves. Joseph screams uncontrollably behind him, threatening to invade Portman's property to end the young man's life. But Rick barely responds with disdain, telling the man to feel free to try whatever he wants. Before crossing the grand doors, the protagonist casts a final chilling glance over his shoulder and warns that he will be eagerly awaiting that attempt. A short time later, the young master's carriage begins his return journey, cutting through the dirt roads surrounded by trees under the afternoon light. Inside the carriage, Elfrich rests his head on his hand and lets out a long, exhausted sigh as he tries to calm down after the tense confrontation. He starts to wonder if his arrogant attitude was really any different from his in-law's greed, bitterly concluding that, in Tyrion's eyes, he is just another selfish sinner. The young man remembers his own harsh words, spoken at the Wyvern mansion, and begins to wonder if he really took that initiative to defend his wife from her terrible family. Gripping the handle of his cane tightly, he wonders if he had only acted that way to inflate his own twisted sense of superiority. The young man confesses to himself that the feeling that overpowered him in that room wasn't compassion for Tydia, but a bizarre and perverse satisfaction in completely crushing and humiliating his in-laws. At that moment, he remembers the imposing voice of his deceased father, Ben Portman, relentlessly demanding that he earn the keep he was given. Gripped by a mix of anguish and regret, Elric realizes with horror that he is no different from his deceased father, being just another selfish man who only thinks of himself. Suddenly, the coachman is startled by a strange noise coming from inside the carriage and immediately pulls on the reins of the horses. Elric pushes the carriage door open in a hurry and slams his hand against the wooden side with great force, The young man leans out and starts violently puking on the ground, choked by a sudden crisis of anxiety and self-loathing. Gasping for breath, with sweat trickling down his pale face, he tries to catch his breath while muttering that he's a truly despicable and hopeless human being. The young master remains there, leaning against the carriage parked at the edge of the road, which cuts through the vast field of golden wheat under the afternoon sky. Suddenly, the soft sound of footsteps crushing the dry vegetation breaks the silence of the place, making him turn in the direction of the noise. Still sweating cold from the physical discomfort, the young man looks around, trying to identify who is approaching. His red eyes widen in sheer terror as he focuses on a rather familiar figure amidst the plantation. He spots Tyria standing in the middle of the vast wheat fields, wearing her simple peasant clothes under the soft glow of the sunset. The gentle evening breeze rustles the blonde girl's hair as she gazes at the golden horizon with her usual serenity. The protagonist whispers his wife's name with a trembling voice, deeply moved to find her in that secluded place. Forgetting his own physical pain and his cane, he starts to hurry towards her, wondering about everything she must have gone through. He struggles to run through the wheat field, crippled by immense guilt as he reflects on how much the young woman must have suffered in silence at the hands of her own selfish parents. The young man feels suffocated as he realizes that his deceased father was also one of the responsible for placing that terrible burden on the shoulders of such a young girl. Aldio and little Marie watch the scene from afar with confused expressions, while Elric continues his desperate run through the field. Blaming himself for also being one of the causes of that suffering, he realizes that everyone who was a part of that poor girl's life, including himself, had hurt or exploited her over time. The young man finally catches up to his wife and grips her wrist firmly, abruptly halting the girl's walk. Startled by his sudden approach and heavy breathing, Tyria spins around and asks, confused, what's going on with him? Out of breath and overwhelmed with regret, Elric leans in front of his wife in the middle of the wheat field, holding her hand as he starts to apologize for everything. Elric begs for his wife's forgiveness, apologizing for leaving her completely alone for 10 long years and for trying to justify his selfish behavior, as if it had been for her own good. Holding Tyria's hands in the middle of the field, he takes responsibility for every trial, pain, and hardship she was forced to face alone. The young lady listens in absolute silence, her eyes wide open in complete astonishment as she sees the proud heir admit that all of it had been a huge mistake. This vulnerable attitude brings back memories of the past, when the two were children, on the day a young Elric wielded a stick to defend little Tyria from a pack of magical beasts. After scaring off the monsters, the little heir turned to the blonde girl and asked if she was okay, or if she had been bitten anywhere. The girl shyly replied that she was unharmed, but pointed worriedly to the boy's leg, which had a bloody cut. Noticing the wound, little Elric jumped in fright and started shouting angrily at the damned beast for daring to bite his leg. Embarrassed, the girl softly asked him to come closer so she could examine the wound. As she carefully bandaged his wound, she heard him proudly say that his name was Elric Portman, and that he had only helped her because it had happened on his family's lands, dismissing any thanks. Seeing the girl's silence while she tended to him, Eric asked if she was always so quiet and suggested that she try to please him, boasting that one day he would become a prestigious royal knight. Little Tyria didn't say a word, and she barely continued her work with her cheeks intensely red from shyness. After finishing the well-made bandage, she shyly announced that she was done, making the boy thank her awkwardly while looking away. Amazed by the girl's skill, he commented that she seemed like a highborn lady, but asked curiously where she had learned to treat wounds with such skill. She whispered, almost inaudibly, that her nanny used to take care of her that way, causing the guy to complain about not being able to hear and demand that she speak up. Feeling pressured by his impatient tone, the young girl barely shrugged and turned even redder and more constrained. Rick grumbled that it would be hard for her to survive in the world with such a shy personality, provocatively warning that she would never get married if she kept acting like this. Then, he blushed slightly and muttered that if he were to become a real gentleman, he might consider the idea of taking her as his girlfriend. On hearing that unexpected promise, the little girl's golden eyes widened and she felt her heart race with strong emotion for the first time. Freaking out over her silence, the guy started yelling, red with embarrassment, telling her not to gloat just because she was pretty, and making up that he only wanted her around for her medical skills. He stormed off, shouting that she'd be begging to marry him once he won the title of knight, pissed off that she'd ignored him until the very last second. Seeing him leave in that proud and noisy way, the young lady barely let out a tender and discreet smile from the corner of her lip. Back in the present, in the solitude of her chambers, the image of that determined and confident young Elric remains preserved in an elegant frame. Tyria holds her husband's childhood portrait tenderly, nostalgically recalling the promise made by the boy so many years ago. She sweetly smiles to realize that even though he never became a real knight, fate, in some way, found a way to bring them back together under the same roof. As the sunset paints the skies of the Portman estate, the housekeeper Rhonda instructs Marie to prepare the tea service for the eagerly awaited meeting between the masters. The head housekeeper leads Tyria de Westa to the manor's quarters with steady and alert steps down the imposing hallways. During the walk, Kronda remarks in a worried tone that the young master's expression seemed quite heavy and melancholic that day. The young lady walks anxiously with her hands together, wondering to herself what the real reason behind her husband's summons could be. Upon arriving at the office, the housekeeper gently knocks on the wooden door and solemnly announces that the young master's wife has just arrived. Seated across from each other in the luxurious drawing room, the couple remains under a tense silence, with Elric keeping his head down thoughtfully. To break the ice in that heavy atmosphere, Tyria takes the initiative and shyly comments that she would like to share something important with him. However, the young man gently interrupts her, explaining that it was precisely to tell her something very important that he had requested her presence there. Fixing his expressive red eyes on her with complete seriousness, the protagonist utters a sincere and heartfelt apology. Lyria brings her hand to her mouth and lets out a soft sigh of sheer amazement, completely stunned by her companion's unexpected behavior. Elric continues his outpouring and apologizes for leaving her to her own devices on the very day of their wedding, leaving her to bear the full weight of the property alone. He admits that back then he acted extremely stupidly and impulsively, unable to foresee the serious consequences his thoughtless actions would bring to her life. The young man acknowledges all the emotional wounds and the great difficulties she had to endure in complete solitude, reinforcing his desire to redeem himself for the past. With a hopeful and sincere look, the heir asks if she would be able to accept his sincere apologies. Tyria faces him gently and assures him that he has no obligation to apologize for those old decisions. She confesses calmly that she never held any grudge against Ellie, and that staying in the Portman mansion was entirely her choice, insisting that he shouldn't blame himself for anything. However, noticing the persistent guilt in the young man's gaze, the girl acknowledges that his heart would never find peace if she simply dismissed his request. With a beautiful and warm smile on her face, she declares affectionately that she graciously accepts her husband's apologies. Faced with the young woman's generosity, Elric's tense expression finally melts away, giving way to a genuinely relieved and grateful smile. He thanks her from the bottom of his heart for her understanding and affectionately calls her milady. Shortly after, the two start walking together down the hallway, the young man leaning on his dark wooden cane, showing concern. Tyria asks if his injured leg is feeling a bit better, and he responds that he's fine, trying to change the subject right after. Ellich sheepishly apologizes for taking up her precious time, knowing how busy her schedule is, but she sweetly asks him not to worry about it. After hesitating for a few moments, the girl calls him shyly, catching the husband's attention, who encourages her to speak her mind. Blushing furiously, Tyria asks, looking down, if instead of calling her milady in such a formal way, she could start calling her my wife. Elric is confused by his wife's inaudible whisper and asks, a bit awkwardly, what she had just said. Before Tyria can respond, the hallway door is suddenly thrown open by the disheveled Marie, who shouts that the tea is finally ready. However, with the abrupt entrance of the maid, the young man loses his balance completely, lets out a scream of fright, and drops his cane to the floor. Unable to catch himself, the young master topples forward and lands right on top of Tyria, leaving both in an extremely compromising and intimate position on the sofa. The god pops up right behind him with a mischievous smile, jokingly remarking that the couple seemed pretty busy planning the birth of a portman heir, completely red with embarrassment and panic. Elric jumps up in a hurry while trying to explain to the butler that it was just a terrible accident. Marie panics and starts screaming, sincerely apologizing for the misunderstanding, while audio covers the eyes of the young maid and ironically suggests that the employees pretend they didn't see the boss's intimacies. The elderly butler gives a thumbs up and promises he'll make sure all the other staff know never to bother the couple when they're alone, ignoring Elric's desperate protest. His face burning with shame, the young man desperately tries to wriggle out of the awkward situation in front of his wife. Tyria lies in the stew, cheeks flushed and breathing heavily, softly asking him to just lift off of her for a moment. Before closing the door and leaving the couple alone again, Audio winks with complicity and wishes the two enjoy their time together well, provoking another scream of rage from Elric. The door to the drawing room is finally shut with a firm bang, leaving only the sound of the young master's protests echoing from inside. Under that starry night, Elric's protests against the butler's insinuations keep echoing through the grand, lit windows of the imposing Portman mansion. The next morning, the first rays of sun begin to invade the elegant room as birds sing happily from outside. The housekeeper, Rhonda, enters silently into the young master's quarters and asks politely if he has finished coughing. Elric, already awake and wearing only a light shirt, wishes his dedicated childhood housekeeper a warm good morning. Rhonda notices that the young man seems to be in an excellent mood and much more eager than usual, asking with a knowing smile if something special might have happened the night before. She sneaks up and whispers maliciously in his ear, asking if by any chance they could be expecting news about a future heir for the family. The young master turns red immediately and gestures frantically, insisting that Rhonda shouldn't listen to the outrageous gossip spread by the old pervy butler. Rhonda turns away with a slight amused smile, but then adopts a serious stance to warn that the events of the previous night should not be dismissed as a mere passing accident. Noticing the young man's confused expression, the housekeeper turns with a stern look and asks if he really doesn't get the seriousness of his behavior. She presses him with authority and reminds him that he spent 10 long years away from home, emphasizing that the weight of this time of abandonment is much more painful for a young woman, and demanding that he never leave Tyria alone again. Meanwhile, in her sunny chambers, the young lady rests peacefully in her luxurious four-poster bed after a night of refreshing sleep. Tyria wakes up with a tender smile on her lips, feeling that this sunny morning seems much lighter, happier, and more special than all the others before it. She holds the small childhood portrait of her husband to her chest and wishes him a good day affectionately. The girl places Westa's frame on the nightstand, feeling her chest warmed by the certainty that the barrier keeping her from Elric finally started to crumble after yesterday's heart-to-heart. Stretching joyfully under the morning light, she contemplates the adorable idea of stopping by to greet her husband in person every morning from now on. The sunny day shines brightly over the vast and productive golden wheat fields surrounding the Grand Portman family estate. In the banquet hall of the mansion, the young couple settle and to enjoy their first meal of the day, seated at the ends of the long wooden table with calm movements. The meal, consisting of fried eggs, crispy bacon, and golden toast, begins to be served and carefully cut. Tyria enjoys her breakfast gracefully and calmly, maintaining an impeccable and elegant posture. On the other hand, Elric tries to eat in silence as a cold drop of sweat trickles down his forehead, feeling extremely tense and uncomfortable due to the intimate mishap from the night before. He can't focus on the food because his mind keeps bringing up the striking image of his wife, fallen and red, beneath him on the office sofa. Noticing the young man's obvious nervousness, Tyria calls to him sweetly, causing him to jump in his seat and respond in a flustered and trapped manner, his cheeks slightly flushed. The young woman asks timidly if, in case her husband has any free time today, he would like to join her on a walk around the property. The young man lifts his eyes from his plate and repeats the words stroll with a visibly surprised expression. In silent panic, so he doesn't misunderstand the invitation, Tyria hurriedly explains that the inspection is necessary due to the upcoming harvest festival. and that the presence of the lord of the house would be crucial for the workers. Understanding the importance of the event for his family's lands, Elric lets out a warm smile and relaxes his posture at the table. He accepts the invitation immediately, docilely, and guarantees that it will be an honor to accompany her during the inspection of the wheat fields. Tyria feels her heart fill with joy at the positive response and nods with a shy, beautiful smile on her lips. Hours later, in the dressing chambers of the manor, Rhonda asks if the corset of the dress isn't too tight, and the lady responds calmly that the attire is perfect. Under the watchful eye of the housekeeper, the young maids help Tyria adjust her elegant and luxurious dark blue walking dress in front of the large mirror. Happy with the patron's look, Rhonda instructs Marie to keep helping the young lady, while she goes to check if the master has finished getting ready. As she opens the hallway door, the housekeeper finds the young man ready and happily remarks that he hasn't been late for the appointment. However, Rhonda's expression instantly shifts to one of deep judgment and disbelief as she takes in the young man's attire. Eldrick appears dressed in a bizarre, wide-brimmed pirate hat and leather clothes, fit for a highway mercenary. Questioning with a graceless smile if there could be any more practical and efficient clothing for a walk in the countryside. Curious about the kid's lack of sense, Rhonda grabs him firmly by the arm and drags him back down the hallway, shouting that he's going to inspect a family farm, not march off to a reenactment with a bandit's gear, and shoves open the doors to Elric's personal wardrobe, determined to put an end to this visual embarrassment once and for all. The young master tries to protest as he's dragged into the fourth, vainly insisting that he's a man grown and perfectly capable of choosing his own clothes, without listening to the heir's complaints. Rhonda throws him back into a chair with authority and roughly orders him to stay put while she fetches a proper suit for a true lord. Rhonda tosses her white gloves menacingly and declares that a noble must always dress with the dignity his position demands, warning that she's going to completely change his look right at this moment. Ignoring the desperate pleas of the young man, the housekeeper starts ripping off the leather pieces and the pirate hat with quick and precise movements, getting rid of those tacky colors. With his shirt half open, Elric is nervous and begs Rhonda to leave, insisting that he can dress himself as long as she just picks out the clothes and gets out of the room already. The woman lets out an amused laugh and teases him, asking if the young master is embarrassed by her right now, reminding him that he used to run naked through the mansion when he was just a kid. Tired of the chit-chat, the dedicated housekeeper marches up to the heir and demands that he hurry up with it. With a firm tug, she rips his shirt off in one go, causing the young man to stumble back, letting out a yelp of surprise. However, the futility of the moment instantly vanishes when Rhonda brings her hand to her mouth, completely shocked and stunned by what she just saw. Before her eyes, the young man's chest and abdomen are revealed, covered in deep and terrifying scars from a decade of war. Shaking and with tears in her eyes, the housekeeper asks, her voice choked with emotion, what could have happened to his body during all these years of absence? With a serious and slightly embarrassed expression, Elric begins to button his shirt slowly, remarking that that's exactly why he makes a point of dressing alone. Rhonda approaches with a broken heart, pleading in tears for him to tell her what terrible thing he had to face on the battlefield. The young man gently places his hand on the tear-streaked face of the housekeeper and tenderly promises that he will tell her the whole truth when the right moment comes. With a gentle and somewhat vulnerable smile, the young master earnestly asks her to keep these scars a secret and not reveal anything to Tyria. Feeling the weight of the young man's silent suffering, Rhonda bites her lips and grips his hand tightly to hold back her own tears. Regaining her firm stance as the housekeeper, she wipes away the tears and assures him that from that day forward, she will be the only one responsible for helping him dress, receiving a sincere thank you from the young master. Shortly after, Elric walks with graceful steps towards the carriage, where the old coachman Audio awaits him patiently. The young man emerges impeccably dressed in a luxurious dark blue suit, with the satin scarf perfectly aligned around his neck. Upon examining him through his monocle, Audio confesses with relief that he feared the young man would show up dressed like a bandit and make the lady faint from embarrassment, concluding that his worries were for nothing. The young master laughs and confesses with good humor that almost happened, but luckily Rhonda stepped in just in time to save him from a fashion disaster. As the two chat, Audio gestures in respect, noticing Tyria's graceful approach, walking towards the carriage. Accompanied by her maids, the young lady emerges stunning in her blue dress, shyly admitting that she put in extra effort with her look for being the first official outing of the two together. Elric turns to face her, completely hypnotized by her beauty, and with his cheeks intensely red, manages to stutter that she looks absolutely stunning. Kyria thanks him with a sweet, shy smile, while Rhonda watches the scene from afar and decides to keep the secret of the scars, seeing her mistress genuinely happy with her husband. The heir extends his hand gallantly and helps his wife into the vehicle under the beautiful blue sky that crowns the start of that day. A short time later, the carriage arrives at the bustling Portman Estate Market, where the voices of the locals begin to echo with surprise. The news of the young master's return spreads like wildfire through the market crowd, sparking a wave of whispers and gossip about the unexpected return of the Portman heir. Elric walks arm in arm with his wife, cheerfully greeting everyone and wishing them all well and prosperous on the farm. In the grocery section, the friendly Aunt Michelle recognizes the young man right away and gushes, hugging the former mischievous kid who has now become such a strong and imposing man near the village taverns. The old locals also approach, happy and surprised, hardly believing that the young man has really come back home. One of them notices the young man's cane and asks what happened to his leg, causing Elric to scratch his head and say it was just a minor combat injury. While the villagers lament that the future lord needs to be so tough, suddenly, an excited shout calling for Chief Elric makes the protagonist look back with curiosity. It's Bart, the young man's childhood best friend, who runs towards the group with an enormous and warm ear-to-ear smile. The two friends greet each other with an extremely strong and nostalgic handshake. Amidst laughter and jokes, Elric remarks that his buddy hasn't changed one bit, while Bart jokes that the boss is so different and dapper that he almost didn't recognize him. The blonde young man greets Tyria with respect, and the young lady returns the affection, genuinely wishing that her husband's childhood friend is in excellent health. Always so lively, Martha points to her shop and invites the couple to come by her tavern later so they can drink and celebrate the reunion properly, pounding her chest with enthusiasm. The Portman heir promises he'll definitely stop by to catch up. The couple bids Bart farewell with friendly greetings as they continue their pleasant stroll through the bustling market under the afternoon light, watching the two walk away arm in arm. The young tavern keeper smiles contentedly, realizing that, against all his past expectations, they make an incredibly harmonious couple. By the end of that productive day, the carriage begins the journey back to the mansion as the sun sets over the vast wheat fields. Inside the carriage, Tyria focuses on reading a book, while Elric watches her attentively and silently. The young man spies the pages of the book and notices, surprised, that his wife is focused on studying a detailed encyclopedia on botany. With a soft and affectionate voice, the protagonist breaks the silence of the environment and calls out to his wife gently. Tyria lifts her eyes from her reading, cheeks slightly flushed, promptly responding to her husband's call. With a welcoming smile, Elric reveals his desire to start helping her actively in managing the lands, gently asking her to teach him everything about running the farm. Well, she scratches the back of her neck and admits that she's been carrying that heavy load all by herself for way too long, expressing her firm desire to step up and act with the responsibility of a true family leader, even if it's a bit late. The young man assures her that if she guides and teaches him the work with patience, he'll become very useful for the business, leaving the girl so flustered that she hides her red face behind the book. Peeking over the pages with a sweet, excited smile, Tyria sheds tears of happiness as she realizes her husband has finally become the mature and reliable man she always dreamed of. With renewed determination, the young lady slams the botany book shut on her lap. She faces her husband with her bright golden eyes and a gaze full of firmness and sweetness, asks if he would be ready for her to be extremely strict in her teachings, exactly as the deceased patriarch taught her. Elric chuckles softly and gently agrees to let her be tough on him during the lessons. As the carriage continues its journey under the beautiful sunset, The young man asks if her deceased father really taught her with such strictness, and Tyria responds with a proud smile that yes. Although she never received scoldings for being an exemplary student who learned everything very quickly. The scene then shifts to a bustling tavern, located near the border of Chagar, under the intense glow of the full moon. Inside the establishment, dozens of patrons enjoy the night, drinking, chatting, and having a good time in a rather noisy atmosphere. Suddenly, a person in black boots and red stockings storms into the place, stomping their foot on the wooden floor, and loudly orders everyone to shut up and listen to her. The bartender immediately stops cleaning his glasses and looks towards the entrance with an expression of extreme surprise and confusion, revealing under the torchlight a young redhead in a dark cloak standing in the doorway, and coldly warns that she will ask that question only once. With a grim and intimidating look, she demands roughly that they tell her where the house of the feared sword demon is. The next day, at the imposing Portman estate, the morning sun rays illuminate the luxurious mansion under a golden sky. In the office, the soft sound of a pen gliding across paper echoes through the air as a hand swiftly signs various documents. Seeing his wife buried in so much work, Eric asks if she usually handles all that paperwork alone, and Tyria calmly responds that it only happens, in fact, during the busiest harvest periods. Tyria then timidly lifts her eyes from her writing and calls him my lord, causing the young man to gently ask her to say what she wants, his cheeks flushed. The young lady asks if he would consider giving a public speech during the harvest festival to officially commemorate his return to the fief. The suggestion leaves Portman quite tense and sweating bullets, making him smile wryly as he apprehensively considers the idea of making a statement in front of so many people. At that moment, he remembers his days of rule, when the soldiers of Parvan would shout commands and demand furiously the death of all their enemies on the battlefield. The protagonist remembers that back when he was the ruthless mercenary Kasha, he simply hated and ignored any kind of motivational speech while resting in silence. He never stepped on stages to spout pretty words, and he never had the slightest intention of acting as an inspirational leader for the others. Elric knows full well that the real reason he stepped onto those desolate battlefields had nothing to do with noble ideals. After all, he only marched into battle because he desperately needed a target to unleash all his aimless rage. Blinded by this mindless hatred, the young man mercilessly cut down every enemy soldier who crossed his path under the blood-red sky. Like a rabid, out-of-control dog, his only goal was to annihilate anyone who dared to stay in his path. As he recalled his former monstrous, blood-soaked face, Elric wondered if someone so corrupted had the right to speak to the people, until he was brought back to reality by Tyria's sweet voice. Snapping out of his dark memories, the young man greets her hurriedly and quickly apologizes to his wife for suddenly spacing out. He then suggests, with a reassuring smile, that Tyria herself should give the festival's official speech, while he stands firmly by her side to support her in public. The young lady accepts the proposal gladly, and agrees that she will take on the responsibility of speaking to the villagers for this harvest. She smiles tenderly, thinking that having her beloved husband by her side during the event is more than enough to make her happy. Later, in front of a large crowd gathered in the town square, Tyria kicks off the harvest festival, thanking everyone immensely for the excellent work done throughout the year. With a radiant smile, the young lady wraps up her words, officially declaring the event open and wishing everyone to enjoy the party to the fullest. The farmers celebrate the opening with enthusiastic shouts of joy and clap their hands to mark the start of the festivities. Hand in hand with Elric, Tyria looks at him affectionately and asks if they shouldn't go have some fun and explore the festival tents. So the couple starts to walk through the bustling square. The locals watch them with deep admiration and happily comment on the illustrious presence of their leaders. A friendly local approaches and respectfully offers a plate of traditional food for the young lady to sample. Then, right away, another farmer hands the young lord a huge mug of foaming, lively beer to drink and celebrate with them. Arms full of gifts, the couple smiles happily and thanks them from the bottom of their hearts for the hospitality, wishing everyone a wonderful festival. As they walk, Tiger's eyes suddenly widen in amazement as he notices something very familiar happening in the center of the plaza. She grabs her husband's arm tightly, cheeks flushed, and eagerly points for him to see the attraction right ahead. On the main stage, a costume performer steps forward to the weaving crowd and announces the start of a rare spectacle brought straight from the royal court. The host booms out that the next in dangerous act is the incredible feat of sword swallowing. The court jester shoves the entire sharp blade into his own mouth, leaving the young lady completely shocked by such audacity, while the husband watches the scene with a smirk. At the end of the impressive performance, Tyria claps enthusiastically along with the other spectators in the square. However, when she looks to the side, she notices that Elric remains with a completely neutral and disinterested expression in front of the show. When asked if he didn't find the performance impressive, the young man scratches his head and brushes it off, saying he's seen plenty of people swallowing swords in the past, hiding the fact that in the war, he was the one making enemies swallow the real deal. Continuing the pleasant stroll, arm in arm, the couple walks past a large panel advertising a knife-throwing game. The tent owner recognizes the protagonist and loudly invites him to take a few throws, making the kids around get extremely excited to see him play. The merchant points to 3 apples hanging on the wooden board and guarantees that he will give a beautiful prize if he manages to hit the targets. Elric smiles and says he hasn't held a knife in a long time, but the kids insist he show off his combat skills. With a sweet smile on her face, Tyria takes his hand and encourages him to join in the fun with the kids. Giving in to his wife's loving requests, the Portman heir takes the weapons and walks towards the throwing line under the joyful shouts of the kids. The game master playfully asks the Lord not to get too nervous, unaware that the young man's red eyes have just sharpened with the coldness of a true warrior. With swift movements and flawless form, Elric slings the blades with surgical precision, hitting the bull's eye of each apple without breaking a sweat. The merchant and the kids are left completely stunned and let out a shout of surprise at the sight. Tyria watches the scene with flushed cheeks, unable to believe the surgical precision of her husband. Picking up on the general amazement, Elric starts to sweat and wonders if he should have faked being a bit worse at the throw to avoid raising suspicions. He decides to downplay his extraordinary skill, attributing it all to pure luck, humbly commenting to his wife that he hopes he's done enough not to embarrass himself. Extremely excited, Tyria claps her hands and praises her husband enthusiastically, saying that watching him throw the knives was like witnessing the performance of a true gentleman. Noticing his wife is much more lively and radiant than usual, thanks to the festive atmosphere, the young man smiles to himself and genuinely feels happy for her. The master of ceremonies then approaches with a large bundle of straw and presents the well-deserved prize to the young man. He explains with a massive grin that the toast, prepared by the Merchants Guild, is a valuable basket full of fresh eggs. With extreme generosity, he gently declines the prize and asks the man to deliver the basket of eggs to the local kids, who eagerly celebrate the young leader's attitude. Kyria looks at him with a deeply tender gaze and comments with admiration that he is an extremely kind man, in a way that is almost too good to be true. Elric reveals he was just reminiscing about the past, saying he used to win these egg baskets when he was a kid, and he'd be over the moon when he found a golden egg hidden among them. With a beautiful laugh, Tyria recalls that the young man used that valuable golden egg to buy the metal helmet of an ancient knight from the village. Although the piece was so large that it looked like a bucket upside down on his child's body, the young master is totally shocked and his eyes widen, amazed at how his wife could know such an intimate detail from his childhood. In silent panic, Tyria stammers and tries to cover up in a hurry, trapped, claiming that he was the biggest mess of the region and that gossip about his mischief was everywhere. However, she bites her lips and thinks to herself that she can't possibly reveal the true reason behind this knowledge. The truth is, the little girl used to secretly watch him from behind the trees every day, nurturing since then the deep desire to become the girlfriend of that mischievous boy. Bringing her back to the present, the young man calls to her softly to get her attention, with a welcoming smile on his lips and his hand extended in a gentlemanly manner. Elric says the post-ceremony party is about to start and asks if they should head to the central plaza. I feel my heart warmed by so much affection. Tyria firmly takes her husband's hand and accepts the invitation with a beautiful smile. Under the lovely starry night sky, the festival presenter raises a lit torch in front of the crowd and announces the start of the traditional lighting ceremony, to kick off the party. Before lighting the great bonfire, he makes a point of warmly thanking the illustrious presence of the Portman couple, enthusiastically praising the stunning beauty of the young lady. The crowd has a good laugh at the speaker's declaration, while Elric jokes good-naturedly that the guy is really quite the charismatic figure. The presenter gestures dramatically to the audience and invites everyone to join in a prayer for the prosperity and eternal glory of their lands. However, in a totally unexpected way, he loudly declares that the ceremony must begin with a passionate kiss between Lord Elric and Lady Tyria. Hearing the bold proposal, the two young people jump in surprise and stare at each other, completely embarrassed and at a loss for words. I'd say, she can feel her cheeks burning with embarrassment as she realizes she'll have to kiss her husband in front of the whole gathered village. Meanwhile, the host continues his speech on the central stage, torch held high in front of everyone. The festival host once again loudly insists on the importance of performing this beautiful tradition to bless the local lands. He gestures enthusiastically and formally calls the two leaders to proceed with the anticipated kiss ritual. With cheeks intensely flushed and hearts racing, the two youngsters exchange glances filled with doubt and shyness. Amidst the crowd, Bart lets out a provocative laugh and shouts for his childhood friend to get on with it, causing Elric to mentally curse the meddling, ever-playful bartender. The young bartender encourages the whole crowd to start a cheer to give the young master the courage he needs. Within seconds, dozens of locals start clapping and shouting in unison for the couple to finally kiss. Seeing that there's no escaping that pressure, Erlich leans in slightly towards his wife and asks for permission for a moment in a gentle manner. With a quick and attitude-filled move, the guy pulls her by the waist and leans her back gently into an extremely cinematic and romantic embrace. He leans in firmly towards her lips, leaving the young lady with wide eyes and her heart pounding wildly at such close physical contact. With his cheeks flushed, the young man pulls away slightly and whispers an apology, explaining that he only did that to meet the town's expectations and make them stop pestering. Tyria closes her eyes with a gentle smile and responds that she understands perfectly the husband's decision to continue with the festival tradition. However, she suddenly pulls him by the neck in a decisive manner and declares that she has no intention of just pretending or meeting expectations, sealing his lips in a deep and passionate kiss. In front of such a display of affection, the crowd goes wild with deafening shouts of celebration as the great bonfire is finally lit in the background. Under the spectacular glow of the full moon, the villagers celebrate joyfully, wishing the couple's love to be eternal and to bring endless glories to their lands. Hours later, the imposing Portman mansion lies silent under the cloak of the starry night, as silence takes over the hallways. In her luxurious bedroom, Tyria appears kneeling on the bed and buries her face in a pillow to muffle her screams of pure embarrassment. She gasps for air, her cheeks flushed, barely able to breathe due to her inner turmoil. Her brain keeps replaying the scene of the passionate kiss, slowly making her desperately question what the hell she had in her head to take such a bold and sudden attitude with her husband. Tortured by the fear that her husband now sees her as a strange or too bold woman, the young lady tosses and turns in bed, unable to close her eyes all night. On the other side of the hallway, Eric himself is also wide awake and lying on his back, touching his own lips in the daze as his heart races out of control. Meanwhile, in a distant locale, the imposing residence of an influential noble family stands majestically under the sunny sky of the kingdom of Armin. Inside the luxurious palace, a hand gracefully holds a sophisticated porcelain cup adorned with gold details. A mysterious man with round glasses and blonde hair takes a calm sip of his hot drink, starting his daily activities with absolute tranquility. Secretary Arns Blackmire approaches the luxurious desk and informs Edward White that the Imperial Army forces managed to break through the defensive lines of the borders of Falvin and Chavoro. On hearing the news, the blonde puts his cup back on the saucer and remarks with disdain that, since leaving the battlefield, the defenses of those legions have been crumbling inevitably. Officially identified as the Golden Duke Edward White, he smiles contentedly and points out that having the mercenary house as the main target of his plans was an absolutely brilliant move on his part. On his side, with a cold and expressionless posture, his efficient secretary Agnes Blackmire listens to the boss's words without showing any reaction, However, the girl takes a firmer stance and questions whether it's really wise to let these two regions fall into the hands of the Imperial Army. Once they have a significant financial stake in the powerful Wall, Edward takes another sip of his tea and calmly explains that the Imperial conquest initiated by the Emperor has been going on for 7 long years, detailing that these two locations have only managed to maintain military funding until now due to the assets they had in their corporation. He downs the rest of the drink, adding that those lands have completely lost any ability to pay off the massive debts they've racked up with the Kingdom of Armin. With a shrewd look, the Duke assures that the final fall of the two regions is just a matter of time now that the feared mercenary is no longer there to defend them, emphasizing that they only need to rescue the important allies and regain control of their actions before the final collapse. Understanding the boss's true intentions, the secretary reaches out to hold the golden teapot on the table and pour more drink. As she pours Edward's cup with graceful movements, Agnes remarks in a neutral tone that he is an extremely ruthless businessman. The blonde guy immediately shifts his stance and dramatically and tearfully protests, insisting in his defense that he is merely fulfilling his civic duty as an honorable noble of the Kingdom of Armin. Bringing the conversation back to focus, she seriously asks if it would really be safe to leave the legendary house free and without any constant surveillance. The Golden Duke lets out a slight smirk and corrects the secretary, assuring her that the feared sword demon no longer exists, and that he is now just a regular guy named Rick Portman. Ignis mentions that they should have taken out the warrior for good from the start to avoid future risks, to which Edwards argues, sweating bullets, that trying to kill him directly would have been a fatal mistake if they had failed in the mission. The blonde recalls that the secretary witnessed the absurd power of the house in the past, when the mercenary managed to deflect a projectile at the speed of sound, using a magical barrier in a fraction of a second, even after having his knees severely destroyed in combat. She rests her elbows on the table and explains that it would have been a tremendous waste just to throw away the life of someone with such potential, asserting with conviction that the current outcome ended up being much more beneficial for their plans. Edward comments that the warrior he knew was a mercenary at heart, and that both of them are the same type of ambitious people, although there is a crucial and very marked difference between their personalities. The Duke gestures calmly and reveals that, unlike common warriors who fight strictly for gold, Elric never acted based on his own interests or personal gains. With a dark and intimidating gaze, the blonde confesses that, knowing exactly the nature of the young man, he made the decision to keep him under his absolute control and manipulate his actions like a puppet. He points out that, without the sword demon on the front line, military conflicts will soon reach an inevitable stalemate, forcing desperate nations to seek the financial support of the Everploder Corporation. Aziz listens to the explanation attentively and concludes that during this economic and military stalemate, the retired guerrilla will be the perfect weight to tip the scales in Edward's favor, allowing the company to amass even more monumental wealth. Hearing his assistant's flawless reasoning, the Golden Luke is extremely excited and his eyes light up with happiness for her insight. He jumps out of his chair with a massive grin on his face and points excitedly at the young woman, loudly celebrating her being such a smart and insightful assistant, always so enthusiastic. The kid walks towards Agnes with his arms open, insisting that she comes to him for a big hug of gratitude. However, his attempt to approach is brutally interrupted by a precise hit that makes him spit out in pain. With her fist still clenched and a frosty expression, the secretary steps over the fallen boss and warns him seriously not to try any funny business with her, assuring him that she won't go easy on him just because he's young. Back in the lands of Weaven, the day dawns bright and clear with few clouds over the luxurious Portman mansion. In his private quarters, Elric watches his own reflection in the mirror while the housekeeper hovers, helping him adjust his elegant overcoat. The young master walks towards the main hallway, closely followed by the trusted housekeeper, who alerts his beautiful wife approaching from afar. When she comes face to face with her husband first thing in the morning, the young lady instantly blushes and shyly calls out to him. Elric can't hide his own nervousness either, and turns with a slightly red face to greet her in a hesitant tone, feeling the adorable tension and the obvious awkwardness that lingers between the couple after the night of the kiss. Rhonda lets out a provocative laugh and steps in to steer the conversation in a relaxed manner, totally panicked with embarrassment. The young lady abruptly turns around and dashes down the hallway as fast as her legs can carry her. The young man awkwardly scratches the back of his neck as he watches his wife's desperate escape, under the watchful and analytical gaze of the housekeeper who is right behind him. Curious about their bizarre behavior, Rhonda wonders if the two had fought, commenting that she had been very happy to hear gossip that the atmosphere between them had been quite heated during the previous night's celebration. The young man gestures frantically and tries to explain that it was all just a provocation from his friend Bart, to which the housekeeper corners him with malice, asking if at least the steamy part of the rumor was true, leaving him completely embarrassed and his face burning. The protagonist immediately changes the subject and asks who the important guests arriving at the manor today would be. Resuming her professional demeanor, the housekeeper clarifies that an important commercial delegation coming straight from the Western Kingdoms is about to disembark at the location. Hearing the mention of the Western Kingdoms, Elric's gaze turns serious, and a bead of cold sweat runs down his forehead due to memories of his military past. She excitedly explains that the high-quality wheat produced in their lands attracts delegations from various countries annually, gleefully adding that even the powerful kingdom of Armin decided to participate in the land's dispute this time. Elric bites his hand in a sign of pure apprehension, fearing that one of the foreign representatives might recognize his true identity as the feared mercenary and bring serious trouble for the peaceful barony. The housekeeper considers that the responsibility of receiving them would normally fall to Tyria, but argues that it would be much more appropriate for the lord of the house to assume this leadership role now, receiving his reluctant agreement. A short time later, the young master appears at the imposing Weaven train station, accompanied by his loyal coachman Yahello, who patiently asks him not to be so tense about the meeting. The coachman humorously assures him that a few formal noble greetings, as he himself taught, will make everything go perfectly, earning a sincere thank you from the young man. The protagonist takes a deep breath and tries to calm his own thoughts, reasoning that none of the surviving warriors who witnessed his fury on the battlefields would come all the way to a peaceful region in the interior just to negotiate for wheat. He discreetly slides his hand under his jacket to make sure his hidden weapon is in place, even though he knows full well there's no good reason to use it today. Suddenly, the massive steam locomotive emerges on the platform tracks, blowing a loud whistle and announcing the arrival of the foreign delegation at the train station. With the noise of brakes and the opening of the passenger car doors, the first members of the delegation begin to disembark onto the stone platform. With an impeccable lord-like posture, Elric steps forward, arm in arm with his cane, and offers the official welcome to the visitors on behalf of the Portman family. However, the moment he raises his eyes to greet the new arrivals and offers the estate's carriages for transport, the young man jumps in fright upon finding a completely unexpected presence before him. The man in the green suit and green mustache steps back, breaking into a cold sweat of sheer terror. Under the piercing gaze of Elric, memories of a bloody past seem to surface in a terrifying way, trembling and completely pale. The man extends his hand, stuttering in terror, and asks if he is the dreadful mercenary house. The scene then briefly returns to the luxurious residence of Edward White in the Kingdom of Armin. The Golden Duke runs frantically through the palace corridors, closely followed by Agnes, demanding that his sister didn't warn him about this unexpected visit. He throws open the grand doors to the main drawing room in a hurry to greet the distinguished guest. With a huge smile and his arms open, Edward cheerfully greets his dear older sister. However, the girl stares back at him with an extremely sharp and impatient look, revealing herself as the majority shareholder of the corporation and known as the Flaming Phoenix. Agrete Valentina waits for him with her arms crossed on the sofa, ignoring his angry face. The blonde lifts her up into the air affectionately and jokes that she seems to have grown a lot since their last encounter. With flames of pure fury in her red eyes, Valentina coldly demands that he put her down before she incinerates him right there. The Golden Duke shakes with fear and immediately agrees to put her back in the seat, not wasting time with formalities. The red-haired young woman demands answers and insists on knowing if he finally found the whereabouts of the mercenary. Edward scratches his head, at a loss, and stammers that the warrior just vanished like a ghost. making the task of finding him extremely difficult. Printina screams furiously and threatens to pull all her investments from the corporation if he doesn't find the sword demon, causing immediate panic in the young man, who desperately begs her not to do it. She grips his cheek tightly with contempt and orders Ruda that if he doesn't want to break, he should try to find and bring the bastard back to her presence as soon as possible. She then dramatically turns her back, her dark cloak billowing in the air. Valentina wears an expression full of determination and resolve as she prepares to leave. She exits the room, coldly warning that she won't have much time, and demands that he at least find the warrior's trail, leaving Edward completely disheartened. The imposing doors of the drawing room slam shut violently right behind her. Still on his knees on the floor under Agnes' gaze, Edward responds, terrified, that he will never reveal the real location of his sister's home, knowing full well that the encounter of those two monsters would cause a catastrophe of continental proportions. Shifting focus quickly, the young man stands up and asks if Armin's commercial convoy has been properly sent to Weaven's fiefdom. Agnes confirms that yes, but she expresses her doubts, warning that a cunning warrior like Kaza would hardly take the bait of such an obvious business deal. With a wicked and malicious outburst, the Duke retorts that even if the mercenary Kaza refuses, the young Master Elric Portman will be forced to accept the commercial agreement, because he prepared an irresistible proposal to save the barony. The scene then focuses on the passenger train crossing the vast and golden wheat fields of the Portman estate. Inside one of the luxurious carriages, the frightened Lord Polo travels in silence next to a noble with violet hair. Positioned right in front of the two business reps, the grizzled old diplomat faces them with seriousness. He displays a cold and stern expression as he scrutinizes his subordinates attentively. The focus then returns to the bustling platform of Weaven Station. Amidst the hiss of the locomotive steam, the important diplomat in the dark suit finally takes his first step out of the passenger car. Elric and Aldio make a graceful bow to warmly welcome the distinguished party that has just disembarked. The young master smiles warmly and explains that he's provided comfortable carriages to take them straight to the family's mansion. However, upon hearing Elalic's voice, Lord D. Polo's eyes widen and he freezes in terror. Under the gloomy glow of the young man's red eyes, terrible memories from the past flood the noble's mind overwhelmingly. The merchant extends a trembling hand and starts to stutter in terror, barely able to get the words out. In sheer panic, Lord DePaul starts screaming and backing away in fear, confusing his fellow travelers, while Elric freezes up, nervous as he recognizes that man from his past. The protagonist swallows hard and knows that if his true identity as the Sword Demon were revealed, the entire barony of Viven would be in mortal danger, deciding that he needs to hide it at any cost. While Lord DePaul desperately begs him to turn the train back to his country, the companions try to calm him down when Elric steps in calmly to make his introduction. With an incredibly goofy smile and feigning stupidity, the young man scratches his head and officially introduces himself as Elric Portmal, the current lord of these lands. The noble foreigner is completely stunned and confused upon hearing that family name, internally questioning if that trapped young man really isn't the feared mercenary. Elric asks admirably if he is feeling alright due to his noticeable pallor, causing Polo to breathe a sigh of relief, concluding that a goofy smiling guy like that could never be the Sword Demon. He closes his eyes for a moment and remembers that the terrible killer he witnessed in the past was a completely different monster. In his memories from 5 years ago, an arrogant noble appears, slamming a violent blow to the face of a humble employee during a lavish imperial banquet. The incident causes a huge commotion and whispers of discontent and disapproval among all the aristocrats present in the grand hall. The ladies and gentlemen of high society watch the scandal with expressions of profound shock and outrage at such a gratuitous assault. Falling on the marble floor after his fit of rage, a swift retaliation, the arrogant Lord Polo screams furiously that some low-born worm should never have dared to commit such an insult against him. Faced with the aristocrat's fury, young Elric Portman emerges, impeccably dressed in a gray suit, and begins to slowly remove his white gloves from his wings with a cold and impious expression. Without a hint of doubt, the portman heir delivers a humiliating slap to the noble's face using his own glove and declares that there is no need for further discussion. With a look of utter contempt, the young man decrees that this grave offense to his family's honor must be settled once and for all through a duel. Lord D. Polo accepts the challenge immediately, seized by a blind fury, loudly ordering the guards to bring 2 swords so he can teach the brash young man an unforgettable lesson in manners. During the heated argument, a strong voice demands that they stop immediately, revealing Lord Elvis Graham in his wheelchair. Lyric interrupts his aggressive movement and looks back with a cold and completely indifferent expression. Elvis tries to calm the situation and sincerely apologizes to Lord Polo on behalf of his companion, but the mustache man shouts furiously that it's too late for apologies. As the arrogant Polo screams that he will not accept such a grave offense to his honor, Elvis takes a stern stance and harshly orders the feared mercenary to bow his head and apologize immediately to the noble. Hearing the name of the feared sword demon, Polo freezes instantly with dread. Remembering that Casa is a legendary and extremely dangerous figure that no one should ever dare to cross paths with or make an enemy of on the battlefield. He locks eyes with the young man and swallows hard as he realizes that the terrible demon he witnessed in the past of Durba is exactly that ruthless creature. Coming back to the present at the train station, Polo calms down and tries to play off his desperate reaction, admitting that he overreacted and asking them to disregard the misunderstanding, leaving Elric quite relieved to suggest they proceed with the walk. However, as he walks right behind the young man who smiles in a friendly way, the noble foreigner seethes with rage, thinking that the mere resemblance of that damned mercenary is still able to astonish him in that way. He shoots a glance of extreme suspicion towards the portman heir. The family's luxurious carriage continues its journey under the dazzling red sky of sunset. The elderly coachman Elio informs the passengers that they will arrive at the imposing mansion's grounds in a few moments and asks everyone to get ready to disembark. Upon arriving at the main courtyard, the lovely Tyria graciously awaits them by the side of her maids and gives them the official welcome to the lands of Wyvern. With a warm and very elegant smile, she formally introduces herself as Tyria Portman and declares that it is a great honor. The prestigious foreign delegation. Noticing the group's visible exhaustion after the long journey, the young lady gently suggests that they settle into their rooms to rest and recharge. She then turns to the housekeeper and asks that Rhonda personally escort the guests to their respective rooms, receiving an immediate affirmative response. A few hours pass, and the darkness of the night falls over the imposing Portman mansion, while soft knocks echo at the door of one of the rooms. Settled comfortably in a red armchair in his quarters, Polo finds the disturbance at that hour of the night strange and wonders if it could be the fourth-floor service. With calm and determined steps, a man silently enters the noble's chamber. Paul interrupts his sentence immediately, and his eyes widen as he comes face to face with the silhouette of Heir Portman before him. Elric faces him extremely seriously in the shadows of the fourth, and coldly declares that, although he is not the fourth service, he will need to bother Lord Polo tonight. Overcome by a sudden dread, the nobleman slips from his armchair and clumsily falls to his knees on the marble floor, trembling finger pointing towards the youth. He stammers desperately and insists that dark gaze confirms he is truly the terrible sword demon. The desperate screams of the man echo through the lit windows of the estate, repeating with absolute certainty that the young master hides the true face from this horrible house. Seeing that there are no more reasons to keep up the charade in front of his old war buddy, Elric calmly approaches and confesses that he no longer intends to hide his true identity. Dragged back by the floor in pure desperation, Paul stammers and questions why he is doing this, begging for him to stop and reminding him that he had already apologized for what happened in the past. Elric settles elegantly into the red armchair, which belonged to the guest, and coolly asks if he's referring to the fateful day when he publicly humiliated his family. The young man faces him with an icy stare and sharply warns that he doesn't recall ever accepting those apologies at any point in his life. Seeing the man's desperation, Elric asks if he plans to stay sprawled on the floor and invites him sarcastically to take a seat so they can discuss some pending business. Fixing his sharp red gaze on the interlocutor, The young master questions if his entourage didn't travel all the way there just to buy the wheat produced in his fields. After the initial shock, the two men finally settle into the armchairs positioned face to face in the luxurious drawing room. Lord D. Polo tries to regain his composure, even though he's still sweating bullets under the intimidating presence of the former sword demon. Rick kicks off the negotiations, casually dropping that before meeting him at the station, he had a private chat with the powerful Lord Yahello. Polo's eyes widen, and he anxiously asks about the nature of that conversation, to which the young man responds calmly that the other noble made him a very interesting financial offer. The protagonist asks if Huel's plan would be to buy all of Weaven's agricultural production at once. The scene then shows Lord Huel holding a shiny gold coin, confirming that all the wheat bought would later be distributed across the vast western regions under the control of the Kingdom of Armin. The elderly noble slides the valuable coin across the wooden table, detailing that a percentage of the commission would be reviewed directly to the coffers of the Portman family. However, he raises his index finger and imposes a single, harsh condition to seal the deal, demanding absolute exclusivity in the purchase of all the wheat for his own kingdom. The diplomat faces the young man with seriousness and expresses his confidence that the current leader of the house, Portman, will make the smartest decision for the future of his lands. He finishes his words with a subtle and ambitious smirk as he utters the protagonist's last name. Upon learning of that exclusivity trap, Lord DiPolo loses his patience and slams the table, cursing the Kingdom of Armin's insatiable greed. Extremely irritated, the nobleman shouts that he now understands the reason for the other delegation's silence, cursing the betrayal of that old bastard who was trying to screw him over in his business. Taking advantage of the rival's fury, Elric leans forward and calmly proposes that they strike an alternative deal directly with the other, leaving Apollo surprised. With a subtle smirk, the young master confirms the offer, imposing only the condition that the final sale price of the harvest matches the generous value offered by the rivals. Polo adopts a more measured stance and argues that, despite holding the position of the Empire Supply Officer, he doesn't have the authority to accept such a high value unilaterally. Rich sarcastically suggests that the final acceptance of those old apologies from the past should serve as the guarantee of the agreement, ensuring that no bitter feelings will remain between the two in the future. The two men stare at each other in silence for a moment, sizing each other up in the dim light of the chamber. The supply officer tries to negotiate and proposes to settle the deal for barely 60% of the original value, to which the young man calmly retorts that such a drastic discount would bring serious complications for the family business. Lord DiPolo bites his lip, tense as he realizes he's totally cornered at the negotiating table. Desperate not to lose the valuable wheat to the rivals, he raises the offer to 70% and guarantees that the Empire will assume all customs and transportation costs for the goods. With the calm and unbreakable gaze of an experienced negotiator, Elric makes his final counteroffer, demanding 75% of the total value, under the same conditions established earlier. With a firm handshake, the business deal is finally sealed between the two men. Elric celebrates the excellent deal with Lord DiPolo, who admits to being impressed, being the first to pull off such a favorable negotiation against the Empire. Intrigued, the mustachioed merchant asks why he chose to negotiate specifically with him out of so many people. At that moment, the protagonist faces him in silence with his cold gaze, and thinks it was just because he seemed the easiest target of all. Since Elric couldn't say that out loud, he just brushes it off with a smile and suggests that the negotiation is a good opportunity to fix the bad impression from their first meeting, leaving Polo relieved. The kid then takes advantage of the nice weather to say he has one last request, and the officer promptly asks him to go ahead and say what it is. In a calm voice, the young master warns that if any rumors surface after today about him being seen in Waven, things are going to get complicated. Elric assumes a terrifying expression and warns in a grim tone that if that happens, their contract will be rewritten in blood, completely terrified by the deadly threat. Lord D. Polo barely swallows and immediately agrees, nodding his head. Later, all the trade delegates gather around a large round table to formalize the closing of the discussions. Tyria Portman rises from her chair and announces with a beautiful smile that her family will officially close the commercial deal with the Imperial Army. Pleased with the outcome of the plan, Elric applauds discreetly as he watches his wife handle the moment with skill. As the delegation celebrates the victory, Lord DePaulo receives congratulations from a fellow traveler, though he still seems a bit on edge. However, Edmund slams his fist on the table, completely outraged by the terms presented, and shouts that this deal makes no sense at all. The irritated diplomat shouts, demanding to know if she didn't hear the orders of the Lord of the Barony. But the girl just smiles calmly and responds that everything is happening exactly as her husband planned. He leans furiously over the table and asks if she has any idea how absurd this transaction is, calling her Miss. But the young woman interrupts him, saying that the correct term is Mrs. The sudden correction leaves the proud, gray-haired nobleman completely confused and speechless. She positions herself imposingly beside her husband and officially introduces herself as Tyria Portman, the rightful wife of the Lord of these lands. With a sharp and threatening look, she adds that it is a tremendous lack of education for Edmund's entourage to deliberately keep getting her title wrong. Feeling the weight of the scolding, the diplomat swallows his pride, adjusts his collar, and stutters out an apology to Lady Tyria. Seeing the humiliation of the arrogant colleague, Lord DePaulo can't help himself and lets out a discreet laugh to mock the situation. Rick lets out a relieved sigh and closes his eyes with a slight smile on his face, proud of his wife's firm stance. He then firmly places his hands on the handle of his dark wooden cane to start rising from the table, already in the outdoor patio. The young master directs his guards to escort the guests safely back to the train station. From inside the departing carriage, Lord DePaulo waves with the contract in his hands to bid farewell to the host. Elric barely watches the departure of the businessman with a serious and silent expression. The Portman couple stands side by side in the golden field, watching the vehicle disappear into the horizon under the sunny sky. The young man turns to his wife and confesses that he now sees her in a different light, admitting he didn't know she has such a strong and decisive side. With her eyes closed and maintaining her usual elegance, she barely responds that she only told the truth. Right away, the young blonde gives a slight smile and remarks that he also turned out to be quite the expert, leaving the husband quite surprised by the compliment, showing the roll of paper with the contract. She explains that Polo handed her the documents and that the real terms of trade were quite different from those announced to the public, proving that they didn't lose out on anything. Scratching his neck awkwardly, Elric admits that Armin's envoy was way too arrogant and that he just wanted to bruise that guy's ego, earning Tyria's full support. The girl then suggests that they return to the mansion's quarters, and the young man agrees immediately, walking calmly beside her. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to a large yellow flag with the initials of Edward Weaven. It's the luxurious private residence of the young man, the same one who had organized that big commercial exclusivity trap. Suddenly, a hysterical scream of pure desperation echoes through the imposing golden doors of the mansion. Edward runs frantically through the luxurious hallways, clutching his head and screaming, unable to grasp why his plan went so wrong. The blonde girl with glasses cries in rage and screams that she was willing to buy the wheat for a fortune and split the profits. Wondering what left Elric so unsatisfied that he would back out, Corvin heads towards the exit screaming in frustration, while his loyal white-haired assistant tries in vain to calm him. Completely out of his mind, he flails in the air and screams that Elric ruined all his perfect plans just to satisfy himself. In the midst of his rage, the young man trips over his own foot in an extremely clumsy way. He completely loses his balance and crashes down on his back towards the living room floor. However, before he suffers a painful fall, a hand grips his wrist with extreme agility. Edward is left hanging upside down and his eyes widen in shock, realizing he was saved at the last second. With amazing reflexes, the beautiful silver-haired young woman catches him firmly in her arms. She's already holding him with ease in a bridal carry, as dust kicks up around the impressive display of physical strength. The girl scolds him for not listening to her advice to keep calm, making him apologize immediately in a meek manner. Shortly after, a soothing cup of hot tea is served in a luxurious gold-trimmed cup. The assistant asks if he finally managed to calm down a bit, and the young man thanks her for the tea with affection. Now recovered from the shock, Edward crosses his fingers and reflects intrigued that, knowing Elric's past as the feared Kasha, he would never expect him to agree to do business directly with the Empire. Wondering what the rival could be planning in the end, with a calm and analytical look, the beautiful silver-haired assistant suggests that, to discover someone's true intentions, sometimes the best path is to simply ask directly. Edward, weaving thoughtfully, agrees with the suggestion and concludes that he really won't have any other choice but to go and question the rival personally. Determined to take action, the young blonde extends his hand firmly to open one of the ornate drawers of his desk, with a serious and focused look. He opens the hidden compartment as he considers his next move. Inside the drawer, a richly decorated golden revolver is revealed on a red velvet pillow, along with the thought that they will need a suitable means of conversation for this occasion. Meanwhile, the story shifts to the imposing and luxurious residence of Elvis Graham. Sitting in his wheelchair, Elvis warmly welcomes Lord Polo, who has just arrived from his journey and promptly hands him an important document. The fair-haired noble takes the scroll immediately and asks curiously what that mysterious message is about. Paul reveals seriously that it's a letter sent to him directly by Elric Portman himself, leaving the host quite surprised to hear that family name. With his hands covered by elegant white gloves, Elvis slowly unrolls the parchment to begin reading. He scans the written lines and adopts an extremely serious and focused expression as he analyzes the content of the message. Suddenly, the aristocrat can't hold it together and lets out a stifled laugh, leaving the mustachioed merchant completely baffled by the unexpected reaction. Bush Graham throws his head back and bursts into loud laughter, covering his own face with his hand, laughing at the situation. The kid remarks that he can't stop imagining who this Ellic guy is, noting that Polo must have gotten the scare of his life when he came face to face with the terrible house. Still wearing a long smile on his face, he genuinely thanks the merchant for taking the trouble to deliver the letter personally. Pleased to have fulfilled his role, Lord DePaul informs him that his task there is complete and bids him farewell to begin his journey back, receiving the host's well wishes. Now alone in his office, Elvis looks thoughtfully at the letter and mutters that the feared sword demon disappeared so suddenly that he wondered where he was. Surprised to discover that he had just left for the lands of Weven. The scene then shifts to a dirt road surrounded by hills covered in fresh snow, where the echo of sudden gunshots shatters the silence of the environment. The barrel of a hunting shotgun belches smoke in the middle of the frozen forest right after the deadly shot. A young hunter joyfully celebrates his successful shot, while his buddies cheer excitedly in the background. The young men eagerly rush towards the massive deer lying fallen in the snow, celebrating that this great feat will finally secure their promotion to professional hunters. While two of them crouch down to examine the prey and discuss the work it will take to drag the animal back, the group leader suddenly stops, feeling a terrible sense. The guys are freaked out by his sudden paralysis and beg him to stop and go find the horses soon, wondering if he can't hear them. With sweat running down his face in sheer terror, the young man signals for silence with the finger to his lips and begs them to stay still right away. He grips his cane defensively and orders in a low voice for the two to back away from the dam immediately, causing even more confusion among the other hunters. Shaking with fear, the young man explains that he's feeling a terrible chill down his spine that indicates the imminent presence of a magical beast in the vicinity, insisting that they need to get out of there without wasting any time. The companion dismisses the warning and says it's obvious he's cold, because they're in the middle of winter, rudely ordering him to stop talking nonsense and bring the mounts quickly. However, a violent crash shakes the ground right in front of the group, sending everyone into sheer panic in an instant. Desperate, the young man points his gun forward and shouts for the idiots to clear the way once and for all because there's something terrible right behind them. From among the frozen trees, a gigantic and monstrous creature emerges silently and casts its menacing shadow over the terrified hunters. A colossal wolf with sharp teeth and eyes glowing in an unnatural blue reveals itself, known as the feared leaf wolf. Shortly after, the scene shifts to the imposing Portman mansion under a sky heavy with snow clouds. Seated in her drawing room, Tyria Portman listens to the account with an expression of deep shock and concern over the gravity of the situation. The 3 surviving hunters appear kneeling before her, faces dirty and dejected, confessing that they fled the scene in sheer panic to save their lives, showing their immense kindness and empathy. The young lady thanks them for their courage in telling her what happened and suggests they have some hot tea to calm down, promising that she will talk to her husband to sort this out once and for all. She then turns to the housekeeper and asks that Rhonda provide hearty food and hot drinks to warmly welcome the frightened young men. The family's private library, the loyal butler Elio removes a heavy illustrated encyclopedia of monsters from the wooden shelves, walking side by side with the mistress down the hallways. The old man studies the book's pages and cross-references the information with the desperate accounts of the surviving hunters. He closes the book solemnly and reveals that the terrible creature spotted in the forest is, without a doubt, an example of the dangerous leaf wolf. Tyria asks, frightened if it's really a magical beast? And to the confusion confirms that yes, although she explains that the species should have disappeared from the region after the death of its former leader. The girl's eyes widen, and she remembers that the pack leader was the very beast that left that deep scar on Elric's neck during their past encounter. Faced with that painful memory, an expression of absolute determination comes over the face of the Portman heir. She takes a resolute stance and declares that she will not allow any inhabitant of her lands to face the same mortal danger her husband did, ordering that she will immediately organize an extermination squad to hunt down the beast. Audio makes an elegant bow of respect and assures her that he will personally oversee the recruitment of highly skilled elite hunters for the mission to subdue the beast. However, before he leaves, Tyria calls him back decisively. With a conspiratorial and serious look, she signals for silence and demands that the entire hunting operation be kept under absolute secrecy from Lord Elric. The elderly butler is momentarily taken aback by his mistress's unusual request, but then agrees and promises to keep the secret as asked. The next morning, preparations for the departure of a luxurious carriage are ready in front of the main entrance of the mansion, with slightly rosy cheeks and an extremely affectionate smile on her face. Erlich says goodbye to his wife, promising to return as soon as possible from his business. The couple exchange passionate glances, and Tyria wishes her husband a good trip, standing beside Audio in the snow-covered courtyard as she watches the vehicle disappear into the horizon. Worried, Audio wonders if it wouldn't be better to give the Lord a heads up, arguing that he might feel hurt in the future if he finds out the truth from someone else, but then again, knowing his husband's stubborn personality, he'd insist on handling everything alone, even with his injured leg. The Portman heiress looks away thoughtfully and remembers that this situation reminds her exactly of a painful day from the past. In her childhood memories, the young girl appears crying desperately while calling out for Elric, who was running towards the danger. Back then, the young boy had bravely stood up to a colossal red-eyed wolf, armed with just a stick to protect her. Determined not to let her husband run into danger again, the girl insists that they must deal with the beast alone this time and asks if her request is ready. Audio confirms that they are and introduces the 3 experienced blacksmiths that he recruited, guaranteeing that they are the best elite hunters in the entire barony. Tyria plans to wrap up the hunt before her husband returns, but the old butler is freaked out when he realizes she intends to join the extermination team deep into the woods. Dressed in an elegant all-blue outfit with leather details, the young noble firmly argues that accompanying the people she sent into danger is her sacred duty as an aristocrat. Seeing that E won't be able to change her mind, Audio gives in to the mistress's insistence, but imposes the strict condition that she retreat immediately if the magical beast appears. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the bustling and frigid commercial district of Weaven, where locals bundle up as they walk down snow-covered streets. Under the softly falling snow, a wooden sign stands out for an old and respected local clinic. Inside the office, a friendly elderly doctor with glasses examines the protagonist's leg and celebrates the excellent recovery of the scar, stating that it is practically healed. Encouraged by the positive diagnosis, Erlich asks if he can retire his dark wooden cane. But the doctor suggests caution and asks that he continue using the support for a while longer. Changing the subject, the experienced doctor focuses his gaze on the young man's neck and asks if the old deep scar from that area left any permanent sequelae. The young man smiles and responds casually, "I didn't have any lasting effects, actually, because the wound was treated by an incredibly talented doctor." The doctor smiles at the compliment, but remembers that it was an extremely difficult treatment due to Elric's young age and the frostbite caused by the bite of the leaf wolf. Still recalling how the boy's father desperately begged for his son's life. The revelation leaves the protagonist completely shocked and speechless, as he never imagined his stern father would act that way for him. The friendly doctor chuckles at the young man's reaction and admits that it was a memorable scene, revealing that it was the first time in his life he saw the imposing Lord Owen pale with sheer terror. Picturing the stern image of his deceased father, Elric swallows hard and admits it's pretty tough to imagine that cold man acting desperate. As he says goodbye to the patient at the door of the establishment, the attentive doctor reinforces the advice for the young man to avoid excessive strain in the coming days. The protagonist opens the clinic door and takes the first step towards the street, covered in a thin layer of fresh snow. Leaning on his dark cane, Elric begins his walk back under the watchful eye of an armed guard. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out his full name and asks if the medical consultation went well, causing the young man to look back in surprise. The young heir's eyes widen in astonishment as he recognizes the goateed man right in front of him and exclaims, "By Pludon." Pluto, who is a childhood friend of Elric and now serves as a royal knight, grins from ear to ear and joyfully celebrates the return of his old captain to the lands of Wee Ben. Overwhelmed with immense joy at the reunion after so many years, Elric warmly embraces the companion, while Luton reveals that he rushed over as soon as he received the letter. The protagonist comments on the rumors that the friend had joined the Royal Knights, and the proud young man confirms the achievement, enthusiastically showing off his beautiful sword, granted directly by the court. Elric suggests they head out to somewhere private to chat and have a drink on him, and Pludon accepts the invitation right away, eager to find out what the captain has been up to while he was missing. However, the conversation between the old friends is abruptly interrupted by a messenger who runs desperately towards them, shouting for Knight Ludon to deliver a letter of extreme urgency. Completely out of breath and tense, the soldier hands over a rolled parchment and loudly announces that it's a ransom demand sent on behalf of the Portman family. The news hits like a bombshell, leaving the two men completely stunned, with Elric demanding to know the real meaning of that call for help from his own home. The messenger, sweating bullets, reveals with extreme doubt that the young Lady Tyria Portman is the cause of all this confusion. With a look of absolute panic shining in his red eyes, the protagonist hears the soldier confirm that his beloved wife was attacked by a terrible magical beast in the forest. Meanwhile, in the frozen mountains of Weaven, the deafening roar of shotgun blasts echoes loudly amidst the snowfall. Two ferocious leaf wolves sprint swiftly through the snow, their blue eyes blazing with fury as they advance against a group of humans. One of the elite hunters plants his feet and pulls the trigger of his weapon, firing a precise shot at the beasts. The projectile hits the monster square in the forehead, causing the massive wolf to let out a howl of pure pain and despair. While the warriors exchange blows with the bandits and shout orders to protect Tyria's safety, the loyal maid Marie runs desperately hand in hand with her mistress, seeking shelter. Aiming towards the frozen trees, the young redhead spots an ancient wooden cabin and suggests they take refuge there immediately. Marie and Tyria run towards the entrance of the old structure, while the maid begs the lady to go inside quickly to protect herself from the cold and the danger. Outside, the commander of the hunters shouts for his men to light the glowstones to illuminate the path through the snowstorm. The warriors grip the glowing crystals and dash in opposite directions, aiming to use the magical energy released by the stones to draw the beast's attention and lure them away from the cabin, where the women are hiding. The plan works perfectly, and the pack of wolves goes for the bait immediately, fiercely pursuing the hunters carrying the light sources. In the dark and cold interior of the makeshift shelter, Tyria and Marie huddle together under a thick blanket as they shiver with cold and fear. Feeling guilty for the outcome of that hunt, the mistress sincerely apologizes for having dragged her loyal maid into the middle of that deadly danger, but Marie insists that she chose to accompany her of her own free will. Holding the young blonde's hands firmly, the maid tries to reassure her and asks her to hold on just a little longer, as she's already sent out a distress signal and the rescue team shouldn't be long. With a sad and resigned smile, Tyria comments that, despite the heat, she would make the same decision to keep Elric's plan a secret, relieved not to have put her husband's life at risk again. Marie is deeply moved by her mistress's dedication and love for the young master, tears of compassion welling up in her eyes. Meanwhile, under an intense blizzard lashing the plain, two mouse gallop at full speed, tearing through the icy wind. Riding desperately through the blizzard, Elric is consumed by a terrible mix of anguish and insecurity, wondering why Tyria. She decided to face that danger alone, and if he is really an unreliable husband in her eyes. While Cabaldon speeds swiftly through the storm, Luton shouts to his old captain, trying to keep him calm, promising that he'll save Tyria no matter what, and asking him to just trust in his strength. Elric thanks his friend for the genuine support, feeling a bit more comforted amidst the despair that consumes his heart. In that fateful moment from the past, little Raudon ran crying and sweating cold, while hearing Tyria's desperate screams calling for Rick. On that day, the Portman heir had stood alone against the giant red-eyed beast to give his friends time to flee. The little Raudon felt extremely guilty for having fled to seek reinforcements and left his captain to fight the monster alone, returning to the present. The now royal knight rides with determination and silently vows to himself that he will never leave a friend to fight alone again. Further ahead, in the frozen forest, one of the elite hunters spots the approach of the two knights and waves frantically to indicate his location. Without wasting a second, Elric jumps off his moving horse and runs towards the soldier waiting in the snow. The young master grabs the hunter by the shoulders in sheer desperation and asks where his wife is, receiving the relieved answer that she managed to take shelter in a nearby cabin. However, the leader explains that his companions ended up trapped after serving as bait to lure away the magical beast and ensure her safety. Relieved to know his beloved's whereabouts, Elric asks the soldier to guide him immediately to the location where the other hunters are trapped, so he can save them. Anyway, Platon places his hand firmly on the protagonist's shoulder and stops him from going forward with that dangerous idea. The knight argues that he must rush to meet his wife, guaranteeing that he will personally rescue the lost hunters, even knowing that they are dealing with the dangerous leaf wolves. Luton flashes a confident smile and asks the captain to trust him, proudly declaring that he is no longer the cowardly kid from before. Elric smiles back with pride and immediately, acknowledging that his childhood friend has finally become a true knight. The young man in armor then orders the hunter to guide him to the location of the trapped companions, and the two set off quickly in the direction of the rescue. With his heart pounded with anxiety, the protagonist turns towards the shelter from the storm and steels himself to run as fast as he can into Tyria's arms. The Portman heir runs as fast as he can through the violent snowstorm raging in the forest of Weaving. His feet sink deep into the thick layer of fresh snow with each quick and determined step, shielding his eyes from the freezing wind. The young man curses the relentless blizzard and frantically veers to ensure everyone involved is safe. After an exhaustive search, he finally spots the silhouette of the old wooden cabin amidst the snow-covered trees. Elric kicks the wooden door open with a violent bang. Panting and desperate, the young master shouts his beloved wife's name while scanning the place with his eyes. Cowering in the corner of the cabin, Tyria and Marie jump in fright and stare in horror at the figure of the protagonist who has just burst in. Without saying a single word, the young man walks quickly and hurriedly towards his wife. Elric wraps her in an extremely tight and relieved hug, leaving the red-haired maid completely speechless at such a display of affection. With cheeks flushed with embarrassment and surprise, Tyria returns the affectionate gesture and asks why he traveled so far to find her. The young master pulls her even tighter against his chest, as if to ensure she was really safe there. He steps back and, with a mix of anger and concern in his voice, shouts that he is the one who should be asking that question, wondering why she took such a dangerous stance without at least consulting him. Tyria looks away awkwardly and admits in a low voice that she only acted that way because she didn't want to put him in danger again. Hurt by the response, Elric looks her in the eyes and asks in a sad voice if she really doesn't trust Ellie's strength either. Desperate to clear up the misunderstanding, the young blonde hugs him tightly again and stammers that that's not what she meant at all. The young man returns the warm embrace and confesses that he is just extremely happy that she is safe, begging her to promise that she will never again face a risky situation alone. Nestled comfortably in her husband's chest, the girl closes her eyes with a beautiful smile and makes the solemn promise. Wrapped in her own blanket nearby, young Marie watches the romantic scene of the couple with an incredibly goofy and satisfying expression of happiness. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes from outside the cabin, causing the couple to quickly back away with alert expressions. Marie rushes to the entrance to check and happily announces that the other elite hunters finally returned from the woods safe and sound. Skrik steps out from the shelter next to his wife and congratulates the group on the quick and efficient job, thanking everyone for their effort on the mission. However, upon examining the faces present, the young master notices the absence of an important element, and his expression instantly shifts to a serious one. He harshly demands to know where Luton is, causing the head hunter to avert his gaze with obvious discomfort and embarrassment. The soldier hesitantly reveals that the knight ordered them to retreat, while he would stay behind to face the pack of wolves alone, leaving the protagonist in a state of absolute shock. Overwhelmed by a sudden rage, Elric slams his hand against the source of his frustration and curses the stupidity of his childhood friend. Without hesitation, he orders the warriors to escort Tyria and Marie to safety down the mountain, while he will return alone to the forest to save Pludon. However, as he turns to head towards the snow, a hand firmly grips the sleeve of his blue overcoat. The young man glances back and finds the worried face of his beloved wife, who confesses to be terrified at the thought of him getting seriously hurt. With tears in her eyes and cheeks flushed, Tyria begs him to solemnly promise that he will return alive and safe into her arms.